Thank you. Good evening, everybody. We are about to start our Town Board work session of Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. Can I have a motion to open the work session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Jill, you want to start us off?
Yes, we're actually going to start off with Rob Deary, who's going to walk the board through goals and objectives. This is just going to be a preliminary discussion, and we'll be coming back to it in another meeting. But Rob, wanted to kick us off.
Sure. As Jill said, reviewing the goals and objectives, and this is what Jill, myself, and the town staff have been kind of working on and monitoring over the last year. Just to refresh the board, this format came about when Ivy became supervisor, and she kind of wanted a way to track. We've always had goals and objectives, but this was kind of a way for her to track these, the goals and objectives, and throughout the year, probably 2 or 3 times throughout the year, I'll come back and kind of update the town board. At the beginning of each of the last couple of years, we kind of lay out the new goals and objectives for the year. It gives the board a chance to review what we did the last year and maybe the direction they want the town staff to go in going forward. So obviously it's a pretty detailed spreadsheet. I'm not going to read verbatim, but I'll just cover the different projects that we've been working on. We laid them out in a few different categories. We had create thriving hamlets, improve capital planning and infrastructure, creating a climate smart and resilient Newcastle, enhancing recreation and improving community spirit, COVID-19 and the pandemic, race and equity, and at the bottom of the list I added what Supervisor Katz introduced at the beginning of this year as her kind of first 100 days, the goals and objectives for that time period. So starting at the top with the creating thriving hamlets, the goal at the beginning of last year was to create a form-based code. I think we all know what happened there. We're not going forward with the form-based code, but certainly I know probably the main priority, if not one of the top priorities for the current town board, is where do we go from here? Looking at, in particular, North Greeley and the hamlet. I know we're talking about ADU units this evening. That may have some impact on that. I think we have a public hearing scheduled, I think, for the AFFH standards, so that might play into that too. So I know that's a high priority for the town board for the first and probably second quarter of this year, to kind of give the town some direction. We talked about improving capital planning and infrastructure. We had a sidewalk plan. We wanted to complete a comprehensive sidewalk plan. The plan should enable the town to apply for grants and find other funding solutions. Finishing the Millwood Sidewalk Improvement Project. So I'll start with the Millwood Sidewalk Project. That has been many years in the making. We've encountered several delays along the way. The current delay is sitting with New York State DOT, and it has to do with some conflicting direction that they've given us over the last couple of years. We originally were going to have to take and purchase some property. Now they've kind of changed their mind and we don't have to purchase the property, or we think we don't have to purchase the property. We're not sure. So town council is working. I saw an email tonight from between Amanda and Bob back and forth, and I know they're kind of going to prod New York State DOT to kind of get off go there. I think we have the engineering plans were 80% done, Jill, is that where we are? So the project is close, and once we get these approvals from New York State DOT, we can proceed with that. The majority of the funding has already been secured for that. We have a $500,000 multimodal grant for that, and way back in 2009, we borrowed money for, originally at that point, 117 sidewalk project, and that was termed not feasible at the time, so we kind of shifted those funds over to the Millwood Sidewalk project. A couple other sidewalk areas that we were looking at. I think the prior town board, and I do think the new town board members were in attendance, at least a few of them, when we talked about the Douglas Road and whether or not to proceed with the feasibility study there. I think at the time we decided to kind of adjourn that. I think the town engineer, Bob Scioli, met with the board and kind of laid out what may be some difficulties, both financially and there were some safety concerns that the chief brought up and Bart brought up. So I think at that time that's been tabled. We may revisit that at some point in the future. Jill, I think the new intern that we just hired to assist Bob and Terry with some more of the studies, some more of the engineering studies for the sidewalks. I think Shadowbrook was one of them.
Right, and yes, Seth Gratzler. He's going to be, he's actually able to do it remotely, and hopefully we can move this project along.
So we want the board, really, the board members to go through these and see what you think kind of the priorities should be, and any other priorities, any new priorities, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So there's going to be a link to the comprehensive plan that the board can take a look at and see, you are not, married to those goals and objectives, but it's just a guideline for us to be able to move forward. They are projects that have previously been assembled on a wish list of sorts. In a perfect world, we would like to be able to do all these things, but, time and money being what it is, we need direction from the board as to what your priorities are going to be moving forward. And with the sidewalk, if sidewalks are something that this board would like to continue with, Sabrina can probably be encouraged to come back with a very detailed actually survey that she did, a mapping that she did to give us specifics on the specific details and segments of the sidewalks that the board would like to be able to move forward with. Obviously, we'd like sidewalks everywhere, but we have to do it on a piecemeal basis. So we'll be relying upon the board for that.
So Jill, I have a question. So just to get a sense of the number of priorities that the town can effectively, consider in 1 or 2 years, was this a comprehensive list of all the priorities, or was it just a section of the list that you submitted to us?
No, this was our list.
Yeah,
This was the whole list?
This was the
Okay.
list, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll notice on here too, some of these things, some of these are easy to knock off. These are things that take a matter of months. Some of these have taken a matter of years and have been a priority and continuous years. So, again, from easy to hard, there's quite a variety on this list.
Okay, and the board should just be aware that this list is not all-encompassing of what the town is doing.
Sure.
So there are infrastructure projects, water projects most notably. There's going to be cement lining. There's going to be, most notably, we have it on the agenda tonight, the replacement of the 120 water main that is going to run in conjunction with the county's installation of a new sewer trunk line running up 120. Things like that are not going to be on this priority list. That's a list that Bart Carey, our Commissioner of Public Works, along with, certainly Bob Cioli and Rob and myself, to identify those key components that need to be done. Paving isn't going to be on this list, what streets have to be done, things like that. So there are separate infrastructure must-haves that staff is working on regardless of whatever the priorities the board give us. I shouldn't say regardless, in addition to whatever priorities the board directs us.
So to Lisa's point, this is obviously as of a point in time, and then you've updated it for what Lisa expressed as the first 100 days priorities.
Correct,
Right.
yes.
Would the goal be in 3 months to sort of update this based on, what we've gone through and thought made sense?
Yeah,
To
we
sort of have this
we
become a
usually do it
working-
quarterly to give you an idea as to
Perfect.
how we're moving along, yes.
Great, thanks.
But definitely, we should all look at it as a board,
Sure.
because if there are things you don't want to do, or something not on here that you say, we really should make this a priority, let's get it on
Yeah,
here.
I just
Take an
want to
initial
make sure
pass.
this is
Yeah.
not I come back in a week and say Jill changed this and Rob changes it, and then you come back a week later. This is sort of like a quarterly review process. which I
Right.
think makes
Right,
sense.
right.
Perfect.
It's more, they're more global projects rather than,
Yeah.
we need that, that sidewalk shoveled yesterday sort of thing,
Right.
that- Yeah.
Continuing with the capital planning and infrastructure, roads, I think, one of the visions was to create an inventory of our existing roads to enable the town to more aggressively pursue paving and protecting our roads. This is information that I think Bart has. Certainly, each year, he's got kind of in the back of his mind where we're going to pave each year, and you know, beginning when Lisa joined the board and continuing this year, most years we've increased. We haven't gone backwards, and most year we've increased the paving budget, and we did again in the 2022 budget. So each year we continue to pave more roads. Bart does have that list. We were kind of trying to get a different format where we can, kind of where it's easier to read. I think he knows what he's looking at. I'm not sure anybody else knows what he's looking at, but he does have a handle on it. So he's got that information. We're just trying to determine how to bring that forward. Minkle Dam is a project that's been on our radar for several years now, and prior town boards have had to wrestle with whether we were going to decommission that or bring it up to standards. The decision was made to decommission that. Pretty expensive project. I think we'd estimated anywhere between $1.5 million and maybe even $2 million to complete the entire project. So we've been waiting for money, and we did just find out that FEMA has granted us $1.1 million for the engineering, demolition, and the project management. And I think we talked a couple weeks ago about the $250,000 we were getting from the county for the to restore the plantings and the different environmental concerns. So those we have confirmed now, and I think we're looking to start that project this year. Did we have an estimate on when we're going out to bid for that?
Actually, I just have the dates escape me, but we will be starting the project later this year. So you will be seeing requests for authorization to go out to bid on the projects.
I have a question about that. Would the 250K cover the restoration plans and the replantings?
It's a 50-50 match.
Okay. I mean, I think that's an important thing to do.
Yeah.
I just,
No, it's required. You can't just leave the, you know, the bed after the water's been drained from it. If there's too much erosion, the sediment has to stay. It has to be stabilized. So, and also the neighbors would not be happy with us. And we had a meeting some years ago to let them know what we were planning. We met with Ossining, the residents of the condo complex that is downstream from this dam that, I don't want to say is failing, but it is not as strong as it used to be. And we've addressed all of their environmental concerns, and certainly one of the top of the list was, what are you doing with this once you drain it? And promises were made, and we will make sure that it's restored.
okay, and would that include walkways and opportunities for passive recreation as
Yes.
well? Okay,
Yes.
great.
The FEMA project that you mentioned, I believe that's probably, I think FEMA BRIC, the resiliency program, does that require any contribution from the town as well, or is the funding enough to execute?
Yeah,
whole
the
project?
town, so there definitely will be contribution for the town.
Okay.
But Sabrina Kellen and that whole department's done a fantastic job securing these grants. When this project started, we were imagining we were on the hook for about $1.7 million at the time, and that was enough to make me cringe. So certainly, they've been able to offset the vast majority of this, and it will require contribution from the town. And you know, I think we'll probably end up being able to update the engineering estimate soon. Certainly, cost of materials and supply chain and those types of issues, I'm certain is going to make the estimate that we had from 2 years ago increase a little bit, but.
I'm sure, but it's an extremely competitive program, so.
Yeah, no,
it's
and I have to
fantastic
tell
we
you that
secured that.
I can't say enough about the development department and the effort that they put in to that grant.
That's great.
Sabrina, Kellen, Bob Sealy, the whole group, Bart's assistants, fabulous. And, you know, again, you're right, very competitive, and we were, yeah, extremely lucky to get it, but
That's great.
a lot of work went into it, so.
Moving on to creating a climate-smart and resilient Newcastle. On December 7th, the prior town board adopted the stretch energy code. Legislation was filed with the state and went into effect January 1. And they estimate that the energy savings are about 10 to 5% more efficient than the prior code. So that's something I think we can check off this list and not have to monitor going forward. Exploring locations to install solar panels to create new climate-smart energy resources for the town. Part of this would include incentives for commercial property owners to install solar panels on flat roofs and approaching property owners with large, non-wooden tracts of land to consider building solar farms. So I know that I think COVID kind of derailed a lot of these plans, but I know we were looking at both the Chap Pack and the water treatment plant as far as town-owned properties to begin installing those. As far as the community
On
solar.
roofs, not.
On roofs,
Not
correct.
as a field.
Correct. The community solar, I'm not sure. Did we have a further update on that, Jill, with the community solar?
No, not, you know what, we actually haven't heard from them.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that a lot of the buildings that they were interested in were school buildings. The library, Bell School, the high school. And so I don't know, we were waiting for the coordination and the identification of eligible buildings from them, and they never got back to us, which means either they're just slow or we weren't eligible, so.
Interesting.
Okay, we had creating an overlay district for the West End and working with the towns of Cortland, Ossining, and Yorktown to create the overlay zoning that would address development in this environmentally sensitive area. So in January 2021, the town entered into the Indian Brook Croton Gorge Inter-Municipal Watershed Overlay Zone. Also in 2021, the town board reestablished the Millwood West End Advisory Board, and in early 2022, I think the town's just appointed 7 new members. So I think this will probably be one of the priorities that they begin to discuss as they start to meet. And I think Councilmember Tip is the liaison, if I'm
It's
correct.
me. It's me now.
Oh, it's you now.
It's me.
Okay. I know you were last year. I thought I heard you announce that Councilmember Tip had taken that, but okay. Airport noise. We did talk just in executive session that board has not met as frequently, but we did have an update from Rob Fleischer and Supervisor Katz, I think about 2 weeks ago, regarding the emission study. So I think we're looking for our local board to meet to discuss that topic. Am I correct?
Right, we got some input from them, and I think we just need to discuss at a staff level the information that we've received from them so far.
Okay.
Okay, creating an emergency response playbook, review our communications from recent events to create a playbook for better, more responsive communications in future emergency situations with appropriate outreach to all first responders. I think the town kind of, each time we have an emergency, kind of learns and moves forward with that. I believe our communication is pretty good with our residents. We use a variety of Code Red and Nixle. We use those quite frequently. I know Supervisor Katz has continued the weekly newsletters, and those are extremely informative to residents. A couple of the things that we've done in response to some of these emergencies, the police have now, I think, 2 or 3 of these portable electronic signboards that they put up. I know we had some issues during prior storms with road closures and power lines down and trees across the road, and we were having a tough time communicating that. We've been able to use these electronic signboards to better direct traffic. And I think we have do we have the portable generators as well for the streetlights?
For the traffic light.
Yep.
Traffic lights. Yes.
So the town, I think we learn from each new storm that we have or each emergency situation that we have, and I think our communication's pretty good.
And you may want to add at this point that there are FEMA grants available that have been announced that staff is diligently working on to have generators, standby generators at the community center and at Chapac. We actually met today with a contractor to help us create a specification to go out to bid so we can get some numbers and finish up the grant. But that's our intention. It has been particularly frustrating to the town that we don't have a sufficiently sized venue to be able to shelter people when the power goes out, they're cold in their homes, or, very hot outside and things like that. Town Hall is really the only municipal building that's on a generator, so we have housed people here overnight in emergencies, but we're really not set up for it. And the senior center does not have a generator, nor does Chapac. And it's been a problem. So in those instances, in certain storms, we encourage people to shelter in place because it's the safest place for them to be, but that's not always possible. And we really need to be able to look to the future and make sure that we can provide a legitimate shelter for our residents. So we're hoping that these will work out.
Can I ask a question that's
Sure.
probably been asked and answered by multiple boards over multiple years? Is there no ability to coordinate with the school district?
The schools, other than the administration building, and Vicki, tell me if I'm wrong, do not have generators in their schools. Do you know that? They do not.
I don't know that, no.
Yeah.
So,
So if the power
I
goes out.
think this is
yeah.
so important, especially we have a Hurricane Sandy again where people are out of power for a week. It's in the winter. We need a place for people to be able to go and shower and get warm and charge their phones and just be safely at a larger venue. So I think it's very important.
and sorry, one more, the library doesn't have a generator either?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the next topic is enhancing recreation, improving community spirit. Happy to report the rec master plan is progressing nicely. Speaking with Kellen last week, they're about 80% complete on the draft plan. I think he said they've got 1 or 2 chapters that they're just finalizing, and they do expect to have a draft copy of the plan to present to the town board and the rec commission in, he hopes prior to April, but he thinks April at the latest. Again, Kellen's done some great work there, working with Ike and the rec commission.
Again, I'm sorry, but just coordination among departments and the fact that everybody knows what everybody else is doing just really makes everybody more efficient, and it's to the benefit of the town.
The enhancement of Millwood Park. We've seen some great enhancement there, and we have a few more things planned. Last year saw the new ball field lighting, the parking lot lights, and the pathway lighting. That was all made possible through the SAM grant. We've been pretty lucky with the SAM grant. The first one we received, or the first several we received, were for the basketball court and playground here at Town Hall. The next ones we received were for the lighting at Millwood Park, and this year we're looking for the replacement of the playground and the resurfacing of the tennis courts. That was included in the SAM grant for this year. The infield was, the outfield was renovated in 2020. The infield was finished in fall of 2021. Chris, I think that's Little League Baseball that helped out there, or were you?
Yeah, there was a gift from, or donation from the NCBSA to help contribute to that.
Yeah, we thank you very much for that. That was
I'm no longer on the board, but,
It was a great thing, and they've given us donations to refurbish the infields at Gedney. Those fields are fabulous.
Yep.
And Millwood definitely needed a little TLC, so it was really great that the
great.
community
Fantastic.
chipped in to help us out with that. Yeah, and a shout out to Senator Harcum and Assemblyman Chris Burdick for all of their help with the SAM grants. They're directly, through their offices, and we've been the very grateful recipients of those monies.
Yes.
Updating the town's open space management plan. At the end of last year, the town received a $10,000 grant from the Hudson River Estuary Program in order to complete our natural resource inventory. The town board last year, I think, approved the consultant, and the consultant, name of mad scientist, is set to begin meeting with staff this month, and they expect a first draft of a report in April of this year. Again, that's, I think Kellen was instrumental in procuring that grant. The chap line, still waiting for some news on the chap line. So the town received $500,000 from the CFA grant, and we're now awaiting word on the additional $5 million in funding from the CMAQ. I think it's the CMAQ and TAP grant, Joe, is that the? Yes. And that would complete the first phase of that. If the board remembers, we kind of had to break that project up. It was, the first estimate was in excess of $10 million. So we kind of worked with our consultants, Barton and LaJudas, to split that up into two projects. And the goal is, if we get this first round of funding, that we complete the first phase of that, and then once that's completed, we would be able to apply for the second round of funding, an additional $5 million, to hopefully complete that second phase.
Hey, Rob, this is very important to go through, and we need to make sure we can dedicate time to it with questions and everything, but we only have a half an hour left in our work session, and we have a lot to do.
Okay.
So maybe we can do the rest of these at our next work session?
Sure. If you have any questions of me right now, I think that I want to rush through. I left
Yeah.
your priorities at the end, but certainly not least.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry to belabor the point, regarding the shelter issue. I mean, you know, you're limited by not having spaces that have generators, right? Town hall does, but then you're limited by not having spaces, right? You need a space first before you have a space that has a generator and facilities. And I guess my question is, if Greeley had a generator, would that be available? If the library had a generator, would they be available?
We'd have to talk to the
We'd
school
have to talk
board
to
if
the
they
school
would
So
make
then
that
my next
available.
question
They might
is,
not.
if they don't have a generator, is that something the town could do in coordination with them? Like, I'm just imagining, obviously Sandy was a 100-year storm for New York, and God forbid, we've never had a Katrina-like event. But if we had hundreds of displaced residents, where would they go? And to me, I'm just wondering if that's an option down the road.
I would say that it's a decision for the school board to make. They raise their own funds, they manage their own facilities. They're part of this community and have lived through, all of these events, and for whatever, reasons they have not prioritized generators in those buildings. So you'd have to ask them why. I
Jill,
just don't know the
let's
answer.
put this all on an agenda, because I feel like we're all going to have questions on a lot of these, especially the new town board members who haven't maybe seen some of these before and certainly don't have updates on them. So can we put this on for another work session where
Absolutely, yes.
we dedicate like a good hour to this? I just know,
Yep.
just because we have so much on the agenda. Sorry. Thank you. That's okay.
You're allowed to have.
All right, so I'm sorry, Rob, that was great, thank you.
No, that's right. It's all here for you guys to review, and I think that's great if we meet again in another month or so to give the town board a chance to review these priorities and see if it fits in with what your priorities are, and give us a chance to reset this list and then begin working on everything. Super helpful.
Okay,
Sounds great.
great, thank you. So, accessory dwelling units and proposed state legislation, this is a fun topic. Okay, I guess I'll start. I really wanted the board to discuss this because this is obviously a very hot topic. It's in the governor's budget. They have money for legislation. There are some laws right now that are going to significantly impact all municipalities within New York State. And I don't want it to fly under the radar. I want to make sure we discuss this. Now, I will tell you that I had a meeting with all of the Westchester supervisors, and the only purpose of that meeting was to discuss this law. You all know on the board that North Castle has sent a strong resolution and letter up to every single assemblyman and state senator in our state government. I've been told that Mount Pleasant will be doing the same shortly, and every single supervisor, but for one, has a real issue with this. And not because many of us do have, like we do here in Newcastle, many of us do have ADU legislation already on our books, and we also have affordable housing legislation on our books, and we're actually talking about enhancing ours here in Newcastle. The issue that most people are concerned with is not this in and of itself, but that it really takes away home rule. So what might work in New York City may not work in Newcastle. We have different geography, we have different infrastructure issues, we have septic, we have different setbacks, we have traffic. There's a lot that we as a municipality and others may be concerned with, that now the state is taking all of that control away from us. And that is the crux of everyone's concern with this and this proposed legislation. So I wanted to bring it before the town board, not to necessarily advocate a certain position, though I do have a view on it, but to talk about it. And I did send North Castle's resolution around, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. And is it something that we as a town board should adopt something similar? And I think we absolutely need to consider adopting something like that. So I'm really opening it up to a discussion. Ed, do you have anything you want to say before we really talk about it
Well,
in
If
detail?
you think it's necessary, I can talk about one of the two proposed bills that we put in the packet for the meeting tonight. And I don't want to get into the weeds, because obviously it's just proposed legislation. It could change. And the types of dramatic changes that we're talking about only happen if this becomes law. It hasn't happened yet. If you'd like, I can give the board an overview as to what this would do and how it would do that, or we can just have a discussion.
Sure.
I think it'd be helpful for residents as well. I mean,
Yeah.
we can all
Yeah,
sort of
I
talk
agree.
about it, but you'll be able to succinctly summarize
And-
it a lot better.
And mention both the ADU legislation and the transit-oriented development legislation that's also out there.
Right,
Absolutely.
that's a little fuzzier at this point in terms of what it would actually look like. But the ADU legislation, there are actually two bills that we can talk about, and I'll talk about the one that's got a little bit more content. And just to give residents an idea of how this would work, the state would essentially establish certain minimum requirements for the development of ADUs. That's an accessory dwelling unit. Sorry, that's right. So Supervisor Katz, you mentioned municipal home rule. So what this legislation would do, if it was enacted, would be to override the ability of local governments to set development standards for accessory dwelling units. If a municipality had something on its books, like Newcastle does with respect to accessory apartments, and it was inconsistent with what the state had legislated, the state statute would override. And that's a concern for many municipalities because of the way this would actually affect developments. So, for
Ed, go
example,
closer to your microphone. I'm worried people at home won't hear you.
so for example, better?
Yeah.
With respect to setbacks, that's something that every homeowner is familiar with. That setbacks are established based on the size of your lot. You may have a 20 or a 30 or a 35-foot side yard setback, for example. As proposed, this legislation would not allow a greater than 4-foot setback from either your side yard or your rear yard. So what that would say is that if you owned a piece of property and you wanted to have an accessory dwelling unit on it, you could situate that structure within 4 feet of either your, so not 20, not 30 as your zoning code might currently provide, but 4. Significant change. With respect to development approval, so in Newcastle with accessory apartments, those are subject to review by our planning board. Under this legislation, the development of accessory dwelling units would have to be permitted administratively. So you would not have a public hearing. You would not have planning board review. In fact, you'd have an answer on your application per the statute within 90 days. All right, so the statute leaves a few areas open for municipalities to legislate in, but really not many. The law would essentially require local governments to either amend their existing legislation or adopt new legislation that conformed with this regime, to do it within a year, and then a state agency would be the watchdog to make sure that the locality had conformed its zoning with what the state had ordained in the statute. So very significant changes. The only exceptions with respect to local regulation really deal with health and safety and septic. So health and safety, it's not defined, you know, that is I think somewhat limited, and septic. So if you're on septic and you wanted to build an accessory dwelling unit on your property, you have to be able to support it with your existing infrastructure, and that's, you know, that there's no workaround for that. Wetlands is also mentioned as something that a locality can still regulate. But other than that, not so much. It would be a dramatic change.
Yep, and what people were concerned, which frankly I didn't even think about also, is that you could have a developer come in, for instance, and buy the house next to you, put an ADU on there, so now you've got 2 families living there. Then they buy up the next one, do the same thing. All of a sudden, you could have 6 units within a very small distance, and then they can apply to the state even to now turn it into a condominium complex, which would most likely be granted, which then would decrease taxes. And turn it into now a whole multifamily unit. So I didn't even think about that, but that was brought up on our call as another area of concern.
So do we have Sabrina on? I'm not sure if she wants to add.
Ed,
Behind you.
can I just want to clarify two quick things, and I think it's important, because when you hear the term accessory dwelling unit, I'm not sure that everybody has an idea what that is. I mean, it's in our town code right now, it's an accessory apartment. So think an apartment above your garage, or if you have a detached, studio, you can have an apartment. But our current law requires that use be ancillary or incidental to the dwelling. In other words, if you have a garage, you can have an apartment above it, but you can't have a separate freestanding apartment. This law would allow, in effect, tiny homes, right? You could literally build a small cottage on your property as long as it has kitchen, bathroom, and living space. And it can't be required to have a minimum size of more than 550 feet. So even on a small lot with a 4-foot setback, you could build a tiny home. So that's one thing. When people hear ADU, I don't think most people immediately know what that means. It's basically an apartment or a separate dwelling unit. The other thing you mentioned, which is safety, that's safety of the occupant of the ADU. It has nothing to do with safety of the town. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but any concept of a secret process, thinking if we have 400 units now suddenly being built in town, there's no ability for the town to think about the impact on the town. Traffic, congestion, anything else.
That's right. Parking is actually addressed in the proposed legislation, and there's an override there as well.
Right, it does not require you to provide parking, so that would be on the street.
And I think it's important to note, and Ed, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just reading the law directly now. These separate structures can be up to 50% of an existing home on the lot.
Right,
Is that right?
right.
And we would have to allow structures of at least 1,500 square feet, the exception being the 50% rule. But notwithstanding that, we would have to allow at least a structure of 800 square feet.
That sounds right to me. There are constraints in terms of the minimum and maximum. So, for example, you wouldn't be able to set a minimum of, say, 4,000 square feet and essentially require 2 homes on the same lot. There's no minimum. You could have what is known today as a tiny home, which is, just a couple hundred, 300, 400, 500 square feet. It really opens it up significantly in terms of what can be developed.
Right, this is all on page 2, sections A through
The arguments.
C.
The arguments, obviously, in Connecticut has done this.
They've done something similar, not quite
Yeah.
this. California, this is modeled on what the
California,
California has
right.
done.
And the arguments they're compelling arguments on all sides. One is for, obviously, to build additional housing stock. The other is for residents to monetize their property, whether you want to have a rental apartment. The ARP supports it, obviously, because it allows seniors to either supplement their income or have family move in with them. So, there clearly are arguments in favor of it, but I guess when I reviewed our existing code, it's actually quite accommodating. I think that's where obliterating home rule and opening the door is something we need to be very careful about. And I understand why those municipalities have all weighed in already.
So I have a little bit of a similar but different take, and I think we have to look at this holistically and see sort of what's going on in the state level, and why I think that opposing isn't necessarily the answer, but more joining and fixing. And why do I say that? Let's start with the governor. I understand the governor has her own potential legislation that is similar to the bill that's in the Senate as well as the bill that's in the Assembly. I looked at the bill, and it certainly doesn't exist on an island. We see who are the co-sponsors. This isn't a New York City bill. It's Hinchy, who is Orange County and North. You have a Syracuse senator. We have Biagio, who's a Westchester senator. So this is, Is that better? A little.
No, maybe
Something-
further away. It's very loud.
Yeah, but I'm pretty far away. It's all staticky. So I think you have to look where it's coming from, and it's not just the New York City left end of the party. You're having what appear to be relatively moderate and working family party people from across the state, different regions, who are supporting this. And Lisa, you referenced also the governor's legislation. I went back and I tried to potential legislation about transit-oriented development, and I went to her state of the state. She didn't say much, but it says we'll encourage transit-oriented development in the conversion of hotels and offices to housing, also as part of our housing strategy. And I try to find some information on this, and I found an article, and I'll just read the quote, which I think is important. Whether it's 100% accurate or not, but it's from a reliable source. So the transit-oriented development legislation would require cities, towns, and villages in New York City suburbs to permit new housing near train stations and bus stops with commuter parking at a density of at least 25 units per acre. Such a density would typically be characterized by attached houses or garden apartments. Any applicant denied a permit would have recourse to the courts. So I share this because I see it as something that's coming. Local towns aren't going to be able to say stop it, because if you have suburban senators and assemblymen and the governor who are backing it, how do we fix it? So, for example, you had mentioned one of the things is 4-foot setbacks, and I mentioned that to Senator Harcum. I've spoken to him a couple times over the past week, and he seemed to indicate that this was an open for discussion and movement on that.
I'm sorry, Jeremy, he said it was
Seems
not.
it is open for discussion and movement
This
on
is
that.
his bill.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's open for discussion and movement on that. So that in and of itself is to work with him, which no one's implying we wouldn't work with him. I don't want to insinuate that, but to say, listen, I could certainly speak for myself. One part of my backyard is probably 2 feet deep, and I don't want my neighbor having a 1,500 square foot structure or a 500 square foot structure, 4 feet on the other side, so 6 feet from my house. So there's certainly a conversation to be had. He mentioned about, I'll use the term grandfathered in, or getting potentially approval of your, as I understood it from him, approval for your current existing ADU code, should you have one. So there's I think issues that we all can agree that there's a housing shortage. Housing is critical. It's frightening for many people. We're pretty fortunate for the most part in Newcastle, but my view is in lieu of opposing it as some local municipalities have, you're not going to, I think, beat this back. I think it's not if but when this comes. When we see it and we look at all the different legislation and the millions of dollars that is being thrown into this, and it's not just New York City, there's suburban and upstate senators and assemblymen involved in this. So I think the wrong tact would be we oppose, don't. I think the better tact is how do we allow ourselves to, I'll use the term grandfathered in with our ADUs, to ADU legislation. How do we preserve some modicum of or as much as we can, of home rule? How do we protect setbacks, for example? How do we ensure that, I think the example you gave about some of the folks being concerned about non-owner occupied structures, buying a house and then building an ADU. I think the legislation says local government may require that a unit in the primary dwelling be owner occupied. So how do we ensure that it is owner occupied so that can't happen and someone can't build multiple units? That, I think, is a better approach. And I'm not indicating otherwise that we would not support and try to work together. But I think it's a better approach than some municipalities have taken of let's just oppose, because that's not going to win. I just think it's not if but when.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we have to work on parallel paths, but I think look, Harcum has never come before any of these municipalities, for instance, and said, hey, I'm proposing this bill. How's it going to impact you? How can we work with you? He never did that. And I think that, yes, we have to work to amend this, but I think, to me, the issue of overriding home rule is just no. Because once they do it once, it's never, that's it, and it's never going to stop. And then it's being dictated from the state, and what may work in one municipality doesn't work in another. So I think, to me, that should be no, and if they want to work with municipalities to develop ADU legislation and to develop other forms of incentivizing affordable housing, I am in favor of that. But to just completely override home rule, to me, is a big problem. And in terms of the transit-oriented development, what people are concerned with is it actually says, I believe, that as long as you're within, I don't know what it is, a half a mile from a train station or a bus stop that has parking, what's then to stop them from mandating that you now have 2 parking spaces at every single bus stop, and to adding more bus stops? And now all of a sudden there is no single-family zoning within the town of Newcastle. And that you can very easily see that happen.
And that's the
I don't
scenario that
see,
you see playing out elsewhere.
Yes, you do.
But I do think raising awareness in the community is really key, because
Very
I think
important.
most people are not aware that this is transpiring.
And I don't see a contradiction between opposing this law, because this is what we've been presented with, and pursuing that parallel path of
Right.
course, getting in touch with and having conversations with our state representatives. So I don't see a contradiction between those two paths.
Yeah, and the problem is the way the budget in New York works is it actually allows them to fund and promulgate legislation within the budget. So once that budget is passed, this is now law.
So I just want some clarity around where this bill is, because there are hundreds of bills that are introduced in the state legislature every year. So I understand that this bill is actually part of the state budget. Is that correct?
I actually don't know. I think probably the senator's
know either.
office
I
would
just
be
heard that.
probably a good, resource in terms of where exactly it stands.
Right, because if it is part of the budget process, that's really far along. And there's a good chance that
It is.
it would pass and it would pass with the budget, which is really around the corner. So some bills take a very long time to make it through committee and get onto the floor and go through the resolution process. But if this is going through the budget process, it's going to be passed in April.
Well, and that's the problem. It's not giving us enough time to negotiate appropriate law, which is why I think you do have to work, to Jeremy's point as well, on parallel paths. You have to say, we are not okay with this, but we understand where you're trying to get, and let's figure out something that makes sense by collaborating and figuring out how we can do this without obliterating home rule.
I will say, when I asked Senator Harkin about who he spoke with, and unless I'm mistaken, he did tell me that he did speak and meet with and made some changes as a result with some folks in the Westchester Municipal Officials Association, which is there was a supervisor from Lewisboro, North Salem, Mount Kisco, the mayor, Ossining. So I agree. I asked him to try to come and share with us how we got here and where we're going. But I want to be very clear. I'm not insinuating or asserting that we're planning on being obstructionists by any stretch of the imagination. But the better route, the right route is to say and recognize, I believe, that this is coming. If the governor is looking for it and there's other housing plans that may come our way, we need to get in front of it as best we can, as everyone has noted. And I'd also say that there's still some protections in here, meaning you can't have 7 units on a 3 septic, when there's a three bedroom septic. So it's not as if all of a sudden this is going to come and be built in these areas that can't accommodate it. But there are concerns, and very real concerns, and we should have questions and issues. My point being, there's a big picture here. I'm not asserting that the form-based code was right, but at all. I'm asserting that folks are looking at the state in general and saying that the right housing answers have not been implemented, and that's why we're here. So we need to get in front of it as best we can to work it and make it happen in a way that is least adversely impactful to our municipality and others.
That brings me back to the point that people were making, that I certainly was making all along, that it's not a question of whether there is or isn't a housing shortage or problem. I think, I certainly acknowledge that there is. The point is implementing a solution. And so here we're faced with yet another solution that seems to be a bit draconian if it's a one-size-fits-all approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we can all see what's coming. It is to address the housing shortage, and I'm all in favor of doing that. The question is how we do it.
And process is key, always, right?
Yes.
So, as with everything, process
Exactly.
is key. And in this case, there are probably many municipalities that don't have ADU legislation or don't allow them at all. And so, the idea of there being a grandfather capability, that's certainly would be a great solution, but to sort of say, we can craft what's proposed is so extreme relative to what we have and what could be accommodated in our town, and I think what our residents would be comfortable with, that it's to me it seems like we have to put a stake in the ground and then obviously advocate for why, not just say we're obstructionist, we don't recognize the problem. We certainly do. And if there are changes on the margins or changes that are maybe not even on the margins but not as extreme as this, I think that would make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the next steps the board would like to take?
So in my view, the next steps are we adopt a resolution and we can craft that. In my view, the resolution would say we are not okay with what's being proposed. We are not okay with you getting rid of home rule. We oppose this bill. However, we are willing to work through other options that can be put forth for municipalities, but by working with the state government to figure out what can make sense and where we can maintain home rule and things that impact municipalities while still, looking at where the intent of this law is going. Because what it's essentially doing is getting rid of all single-family zoning and not requiring parking. It's not, you could have, if it mandates 25 units per acre, but no parking. So, that's even worse than our form-based code, which still wouldn't have been grandfathered in. So, and the grandfather provisions are not, you have this, you don't need to comply, not at all. So in my view, we look at that resolution, we pass something, we send it to every single person as well. I have everyone's email address up in Albany, and then we also propose our willingness to work with them to come up with something better.
And might I suggest that we set up an appointment with our state representatives, Harcum and Chris Burdick?
Yes.
Even though Chris Burdick is not a sponsor, but he's,
I've reached out to their offices, and Pete Harcum will also be speaking with all of the Westchester supervisors as well.
I don't know if you said it, Lisa, but I think we should also try to articulate some things, even in this initial letter, if this is going to be agreed upon, what we think are alternatives and viable alternatives, whether they're Newcastle specific or more generic, instead of us just saying, we want to work with you and we don't like this. Here's what we think can work, and maybe even point to some place that it has worked. And it may be more unique to Newcastle, but at least we can come to the table with ideas such as, again, you raised concern about parking. Is there some method or means we can address that in our letter? Ensuring that that it is primary, there's still owner occupancy, so that you can't have those examples you referenced before. So I think we should brainstorm and look to see how we can add that if we're going to draft a letter, as opposed to just being, we don't support it in its current form, but we want to work with you.
Well, I think they should allow municipalities to adopt appropriate ADU and affordable housing legislation that makes sense for each community, as long as it's meeting a minimum mandate, which right now in Westchester is at 10%. And let municipalities look at that, and then they can evaluate, and if that's not working, then we can look at next steps. But
I just don't think I think that's why we're here, though, in part, is because the state has believed that local municipalities haven't done that well enough to accommodate housing. So I
well,
don't
a
know
lot
if that
haven't done it,
changes.
period.
So I don't know if that moves the ball enough, but
Well, I mean,
ultimately,
one thing to your point, Jeremy, could certainly be to say, this is what Newcastle currently has. This is how we've addressed the issue. We think this is a fairly accommodative approach to this. Let's have a dialogue, right? I mean, as a starting point. And for our community, we're certainly happy to entertain that discussion about ways we can enhance and improve our existing legislation. And I don't know to what extent, on a statewide bill like this, they would look at municipalities across the entire state and say, okay, who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong? Again, there are many municipalities that don't have ADU legislation at all. That's a big part of this bill, is to require that. So for us to sort of say, not just we oppose it because of home rule, we oppose it also because we've addressed it, and we certainly are willing to take direction and guidance from the state given the extent of this issue, the housing shortage. That to me would be a great first step. I personally think it might be premature for us to say this is what works somewhere else. I don't think we've had any time to consider that. But to say that we're open to doing that, I think makes sense. Mm-hmm. That's why I say to me process is key, and expressing to Senator Harcum and Assemblyman Burdick and others in Albany that, the governor mentioned this in her budget, and now suddenly we see this draft legislation. And what's the time period here for us to sort of work on viable alternatives and to show that they can be done?
and arguing for home rule is precisely to allow different municipalities to set legislation that works for them based on their circumstances and topography, et cetera.
Okay. So I guess to be continued, we'll circulate, or I'll send you somebody, what a proposed resolution for us to adopt and that we can all look at. And I'll send it to you, Ed, and then, because I have a few that other municipalities have now adopted, so I'll send them to you and we can sort of work with those, and I'll send it to the board and see what we think.
Have
Oh,
you,
we penciling the
And we'll
15th?
let, I think it was Tara's point, we'll also make sure that residents are aware of this legislation.
perfect.
Lisa, we're looking at the 15th for next week?
Yeah, that should be fine.
And in the meantime, if we could find out exactly where the bill is it in the budget or where is it, within the process?
We will.
I was trying to look, as you were asking, I was trying to look online to see, I couldn't, on the bill page itself, I couldn't see it.
Okay. All right, next, North Greeley zoning options.
Well, as Rob said at the top of the work session, North Greeley is certainly one of the top priorities, as we understand it, for this town board.
Yep.
There was an enormous amount of attention, obviously, dedicated to the North Greeley corridor and trying to revitalize, especially two properties there that are really ripe for redevelopment. And, as Rob said, it's not going to be the form-based code, so then the question looking ahead is, well, what will it be? Form-based code was one approach, but as we've said, it wasn't necessarily the only approach. So I think the idea for tonight is to start that conversation and to let me and Sabrina and her team hear from the town board in terms of where you would like to take this in terms of zoning that particular area.
Well, I certainly, we heard the town speak that the form-based code was not the answer, but we're also, I think everyone on this board is very aware that, North Greeley is probably the area, at least within the Chappaqua hamlet, that really needs the most attention right now. So I don't want to sort of sit back and in 2 years realize we've done nothing about that. So I want to make sure that we address it now because we don't want it looking the way it looks. So we have to find a way to sort of, again, kind of balance the needs of the community with the needs of developers and to incentivize people to come in, but also to make sure that whatever does become developed is appropriate to the size and scale of our downtown and makes sense and isn't as of right. It will involve our planning board, et cetera. So I was really opening up. I mean, I was sort of thinking, and I met with the supervisor in Yorktown, and they just did a couple of overlay zones in Yorktown that they are already seeing are very successful. So that's what I was initially going to propose, which wouldn't involve the entire 72-acre hamlet, but would specifically look at North Greeley. And even more specifically, the west side of the street, where really is the largest area that's kind of decrepit and also not developed right now. So I wanted to kind of just open the discussion. It's a work session and get views of the board and what you think. One thing before we do that is I do want to, and I know, Tara, you have expertise in this, send out some sort of survey that we craft or something similar. And I know we have a survey that's just itching to be, that we paid for years ago, that's just itching to be used, that we can send to people to, see what people's tolerance is for retail, for heights, for residential, and just some general questions that we have then answers to inform anything going forward. This, we don't want to hear we would love a pool at the Rite Aid building because frankly, the town doesn't own that. That's lovely, but we can't mandate that a pool be put there. But what we would want to hear is, well, we definitely want retail there, or we definitely want, residential housing, or we definitely only want 1 story or 2 stories or 5 stories, whatever it is. I want to hear that from residents through a survey that goes out throughout the entire town. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to the board and see what you all think.
Well, I think it's important to have that public engagement take place through a survey, and I think it's important to also do some focus groups, probably virtual at this point, not ad nauseum for years, but, do a couple of focus groups based on whatever seems reasonable for the size of the town. I just want to say that if the form-based code had been truly limited to North Greeley, meaning that if the FGEIS had been limited to the study of North Greeley, which it was not, it was encompassing the entire 72 acres, I don't think the community would have had a problem with it.
I think they still would have had a problem with development as of right and not involving a planning board at all, taking them completely out
Well,
of the
I
process.
think those elements were very problematic, for sure, but I think that the community would have nevertheless accepted a form-based code, which would have truly been limited to North Greeley, despite those issues. But having said that, I think that North Greeley presents an optimal opportunity to have that diversity of housing options, which we all think is very important, and to create begin to create the retail opportunities there, so that, we can begin to start crafting the groundwork for a thriving hamlet, for diversity and more vibrancy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think, obviously you don't know what all residents think, but if there was a common thread through the discussion over the last year, 18 months, and to today, is that something needs to be done on North Greeley, right? And primarily the west side of North Greeley. And we know from the comprehensive plan, and we know no one on this dais here ever disagreed that we need to create additional housing stock. We need to have different options for residents of different socioeconomic status and so forth. And that can easily be accommodated on North Greeley. So to me, that's the emphasis point. And then obviously with input from the development department and the planning board, understanding, what is the best way to incentivize that. Obviously, we're all standing here in the abstract. We don't have a proposal on the table to do something. So that's the next piece of it. But I think the survey and the focus groups or whatever those look like are important. But to me anyway, I don't think there's much disagreement on those elements.
Well, I think it's interesting because you look at the comprehensive plan, I do think that there's an opportunity to bring the community back to that place. That was, in my opinion, the last time we had truly robust public engagement in developing something and shaping something. And so as part of the process of surveying, I think it would be great if we could actually give them a bit of a primer on, what transpired with the comp plan. And looking at that as sort of a launching point. And as we look towards the future and other opportunities for public engagement, be it a workshop, focus groups, and what have you, I do think we should, really be, very inclusive in terms of how we look at the future of development, not just in the Chappaqua Hamlet, but as we look at Millwood and other places. We want to invite everyone to participate, but also give them sort of equal footing in terms of their knowledge of, how we got to this place from a comp plan perspective.
So my perspective is we've already heard that the board supports 10% affordable housing with retail on the bottom at 3 stories. So if the board believes that that will lead to a vibrant community and that will be successful, even though we heard, unless there's some other changes from our town planner, that would be very difficult to make a reality to incentivize people to build. But if we're going to move forward with that, the belief at some point is that 10% people will still come and build at 3 stories, because otherwise why would we pass that legislation? So if that works elsewhere in the hamlet, then, and we're going to support that in the commercial district, then I'm not sure why you would need an overlay district on North Greeley, because otherwise, why pass the legislation for the 10% affordable with retail? If you think it's going to work, it's going to work. There's no reason to have an overlay. What else could we get? This isn't Chapel Crossing, where there's a big, huge private piece of land and it was in litigation and they ended up, providing monies to the town. That's not going to happen on these little lots. So I'm a little confused as to that. And I know you guys were all agitated with me last time, and it is what it is. But we're going to do a survey when. How many times did we hear charrettes? How many times did we hear in a mailing about public engagements throughout all of Newcastle, I can pull it up, I don't need to pull it up, but we're now gonna consider affordable housing at 10%. We're going to consider an overlay district on North Greeley. Maybe with the survey, that is not what was going back and forth only a month or two ago. And again, if we believe that 10% will work with retail at 3 stories, then what else do we have to do? And what else could we gain within the 4 corners of the law from someone who wants to come and potentially build on those 2 big vacant lots, or one's not vacant, but, so I'm a little bit at a loss. Why do we need that overlay? What additional opportunities would that provide?
Okay,
Did you want to answer that?
you can answer it if you want to.
Sure, I just wasn't sure if you were about to answer it. I'm not sure what the question is. I think this is an exploration. I'm not necessarily wedded to 3 stories retail on the bottom with 10%. I think it's a process, right? There's a possibility that it could be 3 stories without retail on the bottom, if that works best. There's a possibility it could be 4 stories on the west side of North Greeley. And so I'm not here to debate what every single comment that was made last year was. If you want to talk about charrettes, again, the comments were a form-based code should have started with the charrette process.
I'm happy to bring.
No,
all-
Jeremy, I'm speaking now. Every single development in town, isolated specific properties, wouldn't require a charrette. No one said that, no one suggested that, and that would be silly. So the idea here is this is an area of town that there clearly is consensus needs to be addressed, and we want to make sure we have community engagement. We're exploring what that could look like. So that's where we are. That's where I am. I think it's probably more productive for us on February 8th to think about what that can look like going forward than to say, well, that's not specifically what someone said on March 12th, 2021. That doesn't seem productive to me. So that's my only response on that point.
And we are elected officials, and I'd like to hear from our constituents. That being said, there may be a way to do it, and I'm not fully versed on this. There may be a way to do it through zoning just on that side of the street, rather than an overlay zone that could potentially be applied other places throughout town. So if I recall correctly, you could potentially redesignate that side of the street as a different zoning district as well, and put different rules on that.
There are a number of approaches. Overlay is one. Overlay would actually apply a different zoning on top of the existing zoning that's there now. And another approach would be, like you said, actually just changing the existing zoning with respect to one or several properties. We could also look at other districts, existing zoning districts like the MFRC, and ask, well, are there text changes there that might be appropriate, and have that apply to this area under certain conditions. These are all just different means to an end. The big questions, though, are height and retail. And that's what the prior town board spent a lot of time wrestling with. And whether we're talking about a survey or charrettes or some other public engagement, I think that those are the key questions that have to be answered.
I agree.
What I'm hearing the board say is it wouldn't be appropriate or effective just to rush into a public hearing with proposed legislation and kind of put out there that the board wants to do X. It'd be more appropriate to put out ideas and revisit what the community sentiment is with respect to those issues, raise awareness, have engagement, and then push out some proposed legislation.
That was
That-
exactly
That's
my thought.
exactly right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Yes.
Thank you for so eloquently stating it.
So are we moving
Simple
forward at some point?
concept.
Are we moving forward at some point with the 10% affordable?
Yes, we have a
On
public
retail?
hearing on that next week.
All right, so, again, and maybe I'm just missing this. If we're going to move forward with that, we're accepting that we believe it will work, because otherwise, why would we legislate it? So that's what brings me at a little bit of a loss. And I can appreciate, Chris, what you're saying, but I'm happy to sit down, and I'm never afraid to publicly and go through the very specific examples, multiples of charrettes and public forums in every corner of Newcastle. And I get it, it's not convenient, but there are plenty of people who also, whether we like it or not, interpreted that there would not be 4 stories, whether it was said specifically at times and said that it was not as a matter of right at other times, who did not want 4 stories on the west side. And we heard from residents who very specifically were adamant about insisting that there be retail. How can we get rid of the retail? And I know, Lisa, you were a very strong proponent of retail. So, again, I realize no one's rushing, but these are critical questions of zoning in the hamlet. And if we're going to do it, it's not by a survey, it's not just by a public hearing. And I'm at a loss as to what else we could get in terms of the benefit of the community if we believe 3 stories will work. And if we don't, then we should not be passing that legislation for 10% affordable when we have retail as well. And we shouldn't be taking away retail from where it's currently permitted to make it work in that overlay district, if that's, it shouldn't even be considered.
All right, so what are our next steps?
Well, I just wanted to give Sabrina an opportunity to chime in, because I know she and I have talked about the outreach piece of this, and I know she's got some thoughts about what that might look like.
Mm-hmm.
Am I putting you on the spot, Sabrina?
It's fine. You're right, we haven't done extensive outreach since the 2014 to 2017 comprehensive plan. And during that process, we outreach to the community in several different ways. I think that it's important to revisit the community, and specifically explore some of the things they told us during that process that relate to the issues of North Greeley and the downtown, and whether or not you want to have first floor retail, commercial use, that type of thing. And I think that there are many avenues that we can do that in. We now have to factor the advantages of using Zoom meetings and getting people to participate. We tried really hard without Zoom to try and get people who really didn't participate in public meetings, so we would reach the community. We went to the parks. So I think that, if we're looking at an outreach, we really need to, sit down, and I need to provide you with a proposal as to how to do that and how to do that effectively. I think emailing a survey is only one component of an outreach. It's very hard to craft a survey to really, if you ask people, do you want to see affordable housing in Newcastle? I don't think that they're going to say yes. What they will look for is housing for their children, things that will draw their children after college back here, take advantage of being able to commute to New York City relatively easily, things like that. So, I can do some research for you. There's some new technologies given the computer and how much people are relying on computers for communication, to try and come up with an outreach program, not necessarily a survey. It can include a survey, but more of an outreach program to help take the community's temperature.
Yep.
I also think that, as Ed said, there are many ways we could look at rezoning a portion of the hamlet, doing an overlay, a special area plan. There are several different tools that we could use to try and address what the town board's desire is regarding that area.
It might be helpful if the town board had direction for Sabrina and staff with respect to scope. So, there was a tremendous amount of engagement on this issue over the last couple of years, and I take it the board doesn't want to reinvent the wheel. and start from scratch on that we can build on that work that was done. But what do you, in terms of timeline, and in terms of what this should look like, could you give some sense as to what you're thinking?
I mean, I'm thinking I don't really want to rest on our laurels. I want to move ahead with this, you know. Just because we didn't adopt the form-based code doesn't mean there isn't work to be done. So I'd like to move this forward.
Ed, I'm not quite sure what public engagement there was other than those public hearings on the form-based code.
For better or worse, I think the public hearings brought out a lot of public comment, and that's
All right,
what
fair
I was
enough.
referring to.
I think, though, just to clarify what I just said, I don't want to just move ahead for the sake of moving ahead. It has to be done thoughtfully and appropriately. So, you know, if we are putting out a survey and we definitely are going to have public engagement, we need to do that thoughtfully with the correct questions, the correct facilitators, and make sure that it's done, you know, in a manner that's going to really allow us to ascertain what the public wants and allows the public enough avenues by which they can give us that input.
Can I
And,
just
and
ask,
so I
Sabrina,
think,
may I just ask you a quick clarification, and then you mentioned 2014 to 17 engagement.
correct.
But you also highlighted the difficulty inherent in that. Right now we have Zoom, we have a sort of an easier way to reach a broader population, if you will. I also feel like we have a moment in time where residents are focused on this issue, and so by definition will be more likely to contribute. Because to Ed, to your point, by the time we had public hearings on the form-based code and the EIS, you know, sorry to use the ADU example, but we were already looking at a target that people had strong opinions on, as opposed to shaping what that could be.
So what I was going to say, you know, when Ed asked the question of time frame, right? And so just to think about our parks and recreation open space master plan, you know, we have a survey running for that right now, and you know, we take advantage of the annual water mailing to really, you know, to let people know about things, to give them that survey. It's on our website. There's a QR code in our parks. You know, so thinking about an outreach program, you know, thinking about the time you want it to run. When it comes to parks, people use the parks. There's a higher population using parks in the nicer weather. You know, there is still a strong contingent using them now, but, you know, we need to run that survey, you know, for a full cycle, if you will, of use. So when it comes to something like a comprehensive plan survey, you want to make sure that, you know, you get people that are going through all stages of their lives in the community. You know, so, you know, to gear up for a survey, right? If we were to use a computer platform, which I think is essential in this day and age, you know, there's certain information that you put out there that people can have tools to play with. And I can present to you some of these outreach platforms that are done in the computer. There's also the facilitation size. And Lisa, you mentioned, you know, the trained facilitators and whatnot, you know, for people coming to a meeting. We can do that as well. We can do a paper print survey. So there's several different media that we can use for outreach to really get the pulse of the community. And we could do that now. You know, Ed mentioned that the public hearings during the form-based code process were really used as a way to involve people. We had outstanding participation through Zoom. At those public hearings, more so than trying to get people to come to a meeting at town hall or to an afternoon meeting at the park. You know, so we have a lot of great tools right now that we know people are wanting to engage through. So, you know, I don't want to lose that momentum. I want to be able to capture that momentum and hear what people have to say.
Okay, so let's, and I have the names also of some excellent firms. I unfortunately left it in a different folder in my office that can help facilitate this as well. And I know, Tara, you have ideas, and I know, Sabrina, you did. I looked at some of the companies you were suggesting. I think there were 3 of them. So let's sort of circle up on that, and then, get some ideas and see where we are.
Got a plan to move forward.
Is this something we should have on next week's agenda as a check-in matter, status, or trying to get a sense of timing?
I think I don't know if next week's we're gonna have enough time.
Okay.
So I would do it at the following meeting, I think.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, March 1.
March 1?
Yeah.
That's our joint planning board meeting, but actually, that might be a good time to bring it up because they may be interested in this as well.
Perfect.
Okay,
Excellent.
all right. We have a lot in there. I'm apologizing already for those who are joining the town board meeting, but you get to listen to our work session.
Sabrina, you can, I think that's all on the agenda for you. You're more than welcome to listen,
It's fascinating.
but if there's something else that you have to do, you're excused. I'll see you tomorrow. at the
Thanks, Sabrina.
department.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Sabrina.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sabrina. All right, so the next thing on our agenda is a proposed social media and communication policy. Now, despite what some said, this was not politically motivated, but something I think was long overdue, and something, in fact, that our ethics board had proposed years ago, that this is something that we should consider adopting. So there is a proposed policy in the packet. Obviously, this is a work session, so it's here for discussion, not voting upon it this evening. And it goes through, and I'll let you kind of talk to it, but just kind of overall, overarching, it really is meant to talk about sort of acceptable content, acceptable conduct, things that can and can't be included, for instance, in a newsletter or town communications. It does not speak to what people can say individually. This is not designed to stop people's free speech. It's designed to put parameters around communications coming under the umbrella of the town. I will leave that to you.
Well, yeah, so the town created a e-newsletter in 2014 that has become, I think, a very popular a successful way of pushing out information to residents. And obviously, social media, the use of social media has just continued to grow over that time. But the town didn't have really a robust policy that would provide some guidelines for users in terms of what was an acceptable use of those channels. Town has had a use policy with respect to employees for some time, but at town board level, and particularly with respect to the newsletter, that hasn't existed, and that was the point of trying to put something on paper as a guidance document. So as you said, there are some examples of acceptable content, unacceptable content. This was created drawing from other social media policies that other municipalities have adopted, but also really trying to tailor it to what is being done in Newcastle, but again, particularly with respect to the newsletter. So the one other thing I should just highlight, so we the board workshopped this about a month ago, I want to say. One question was, well, who is going to enforce these guidelines? So the concept that's put forward in this draft is that if there was a situation where a town board member believed that social media had been used inappropriately, they could go to the ethics board for an advisory opinion, and they would be the ones that would call the balls and strikes on that type of situation.
All right, so I'm pretty familiar with this document, so I'm going to open up to the board if anyone had any thoughts, comments. Go for it. Chris?
Ditto to what you said.
Oh.
I'm very comfortable with it.
My question, Ed, is when there's issues of, I'm sorry, if there's an issue in controversy, setting aside if it's not the whole board that supports something, but facts aren't always facts, meaning we could disagree what something means or how to interpret something. So how, in the form-based code, we have to look at it because that's a great example. Not to get about the form-based code, but there was issues where someone might say this is right and someone might say this is wrong. So who's the arbiter of what's right and what's wrong? Is it if one disagrees that it's not right? So I think the supervisor, within reason, should be given more latitude to be able to say, as a supervisor, what just because I disagree or Vicky disagrees or Chris or Tara disagrees, if the supervisor should be able to, within reason, be able to advocate. So my question, what happens when there's issues that are very heated and there's conflict and it's something that will bring out challenges on either side to a particular fact? Who's the arbiter?
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just make a statement? So, that's actually a good example because that's the way the newsletter was being used during the form-based code process is actually one of the reasons that this sort of came to be because people stopped reading it.
Plenty of people who.
And in my view, the newsletter should not be used to advocate positions. It's one primarily to advocate a position. Which is why, like, I try now, if I write something, I'll say the board discussed this or, didn't agree on this to see what happened, click this link and watch the meeting. So I purposely, as supervisor, try not to advocate too much because I want our residents to form their own opinions. So we did put something in here saying that while the supervisor does have latitude as to what goes in here, if I'm promulgating something, I'm bringing it before the board, I want the board to consider this, I may say my reasons why I think it should be considered. But I'm not then advocating for a particular position. And we do put in that if it's primarily intended to advocate an opinion or position not unanimously held by the town board, that shouldn't be in here. But to say, look, there's obviously going to be opinion in this, but the point is to try to find a balanced approach to that. And this is all gray. You're never going to find really black and white lines on this. So a lot of it is gray. So the point is these are kind of guidelines to have us do our best.
So that's fair. But my question is really twofold. And that's fair and that's addressed. It's more of an issue of facts. So there were times, for example, that I put in that were facts as they were provided to us. But people would disagree with those facts. And that got people upset on both sides. So, well, not upset on both sides. It got some people upset. So who's the arbiter of those facts? I don't mean to get too lost in it, but when something is contentious, right or wrong, there's going to be dispute. And even if you're not advocating, you're just saying this is X and this is Y, there could be disagreement, just as there was in that particular legislation. So my question to Ed is, who's the arbiter of something like that? Not opinion, but
it really is a challenging topic to try to draft around, right? To try to provide guidance in a way that's meaningful, because as you've pointed out, there's gray here. But if you look at the bottom of page 1, where we talk about trying to carve out some space for the town supervisor, who has been and will be, I think, responsible for pushing out the e-newsletter, trying to allow the supervisor to exercise some editorial discretion in terms of content. Remember, this has to go out on a weekly basis. It's happening in real time. There's not really, you can't just stop and have a meeting and talk about a sentence in the newsletter. It's got to go out. So this is intended to provide some guidance. And if you look at where it carries over from page 1 to 2, and it talks about information to provide an explanation of initiatives, proposed legislation, policies, and other matters that are being introduced or advanced by the supervisor or considered by the town board. If you balance that against the first bullet in not the next section, but the section below where it talks about unacceptable content, and this is what Supervisor Katz was pointing out, content that is primarily intended to advocate an opinion or position. So that's where we're trying, and I don't profess to have, hit the first pitch on this question. Like I said, it's difficult to draft around, but that was where the attempt was made.
The fourth bullet in the first section sort of also fleshes out the first part, which is, incidental explanations as may be necessary to inform residents. So, I mean, to your point, Jeremy, 100%, right? It's virtually impossible to say, ex ante, what's going to be acceptable. It's going to be a process of trial and error. But I think the goal that Ed just described, as I read this, is certainly what I was thinking when we talked about this initially. And to me, gets us a lot closer to what the e-newsletter should be for that part of it. And obviously, there are going to be calls. And if over time the e-newsletter turns into top 10 reasons why this piece of legislation I support is absolutely the right thing, and there are two people on the board who disagree, that will absolutely be an editorial or similar content primarily intended to advocate an opinion. It's not going to be ancillary explanation. It's not going to be sort of incidental editorial comment. So to me, that's a clear case. So, I think it's going to be a process of trial and error. We do what we have now. It's just up to the vagaries of whatever the person in that seat. And frankly, up until this policy, there was no description of who was even responsible for the report. It was just sort of there. So I think this gets us a lot closer to something that all residents would feel comfortable with.
I agree. I mean, I absolutely, the principle of this, I 100% agree, and I think most of it I agree. I think where I just see issue is when you have those times where something's at conflict and people interpret, I'll use the term fact, whether it's a fact or not, differently, then where do we go from there? And that's not routine, but it's going to happen over time. And who's the arbiter of that?
Well, Jeremy, you're talking about disagreement about facts, which can happen, but this is discussing opinions, so that would be
But there's a separate...
quite different.
Yes, but that I agree. That is about opinions, yes, but it's also, you are putting facts in the newsletter that...
Right. Well, I don't mean to rehash. We went through that. So first of all, Ed, I just want to thank you for drafting this. It's always a heavy lift to draft a new policy as opposed to revising even extensive revisions. This was difficult. I just think, again, that it's a best practice to have a policy on communications and social media. I think that it's typical now. It's kind of unusual to not have that at all. So I think this is a good move. I think this is an excellent draft. I just have a few suggestions, and we'll see if everyone agrees, but I'm just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything. So on page 2, in that section, we were just talking about the unacceptable content for the town social media and communication outlets. The first bullet point says that editorials and similar content that is primarily intended to advocate an opinion or position not unanimously held. Is it the position that's not unanimously held or the opinion?
Both.
Okay, so if there's a position that's not unanimously held, that could be problematic. I would say that because a position could be a vote on something. So for instance, you could have a vote on the affordable housing initiative or a vote on the stated goals, and you might have a 4-1 or 4-2 vote, but yet it's a town vote, and it's a...
But Lisa wouldn't write an editorial about that.
But it's not, right, if
Right.
I said the board passed this by a vote of 4-1, that's
Right.
a fact, that's not advocating a position on that.
If Lisa wrote a 3-paragraph editorial.
Okay, so that's how you're reading the word position.
It's-
As an-
Yes,
because a
I'm
position
reading
could
as an
be-
opinion.
Well, no.
The word position could also mean,
No, but it's the precursor to
vote.
that. It's the editorial or content intended to advocate a position.
Primarily intended
Right.
to advocate.
Propaganda.
So the content there that would be objectionable would be 3 paragraphs editorializing about why the position is right, not what the position was.
okay.
Okay.
Let's see, another comment I had, this is very minor, but on page 3, under public comments made on town social media accounts, in the second paragraph, in the second line, it says, instead, the town's social media accounts are strictly intended to provide the town with an alternative avenue for disseminating information to the public. I think that should be the first sentence, because I think that's the main point of that paragraph.
Say that again?
So, that the paragraph, the section begins by talking about a public comment made on a town social media site does not constitute a legal or official notice to the town, etc. I think it should start by saying, the town's social media accounts are strictly intended to provide the town with an alternative, or with an avenue for disseminating information to the public. That's sort of establishing what it's for, as opposed to, back and forth with the public. I mean, it's just a minor comment
that's
on
fine.
the structure of the policy.
Well, but actually, that paragraph is all about public comments and the fact that they're not legal or official notice to the town. I think you're, so
Well, maybe that paragraph, that whole paragraph should be the first paragraph there, but switch the sentences.
Yeah.
Sentence order.
That would be fine. Another proviso that I'd seen in another town policy, I don't remember what it was, but this was when I was looking up other town social media policies. There was one that stated that any comments deemed to be a threat to any town official, employee, citizen, local business, etc., are taken in a serious manner and may be subject for review by the authorities. So that was something that I thought would be,
Highly relevant.
something
Right.
helpful
We
to
do have
add.
threats to any person or organization.
Do you have that already?
Yeah, that's on,
I might have missed.
at the top, near the top of page 3,
In
Okay.
unacceptable,
third bullet.
second from the
Fourth
bottom.
bullet, sorry.
Second from the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that covers it. Okay. Also, I thought it would be helpful to state that any personal account that relates to town business would be considered a public record and subject to FOIL, as well as applicable sections of records retention. Is that true?
Well, the concern there is that it's not a record that's actually in the town's possession or control.
Right.
Right? It's
Right.
out, on social media someplace. It's not the person may have access to it, may not at some point, but I know the town doesn't have any way to retrieve
I
it,
would have no
preserve
way of
it.
retrieving that. It's not within my
Right.
control.
But when board members are asked to divulge emails or, correspondence.
Email's
that's-
different, but.
But social media posts don't fall into that.
They're not something that we treat as a public record that's foilable, no. Email certainly.
Okay,
Text
that's good to
messages
know. Has that
sometimes.
Emails,
Yeah.
yes.
Has
You
that
know-
question ever been deliberated by the,
We have not,
By
I
the
don't
committee?
think we've ever had a foil for that.
And you know what, a problem with that too is if, let's say I post something on my social media account and somebody else shares it, and then like somewhere where I'm not even know it's existing, people are commenting on it, I feel like it would be hard to find that.
oh, no, but I think it would pertain only to the communication by the official, on an official matter, on an official town matter.
I do think that in corporate environments, that's often the case, that they have to record the
Well,
social media.
Vicky, I'm
Right,
not-
it's not an unusual.
Vicky, I'm not sure what you're suggesting. When would someone be communicating an official town matter on Facebook?
On your official town board page, for instance.
I don't have an official town board page.
But I
mean, a
do, so
personal-
I
I'm
may
sorry, a
say like there's a
personal-
water main break, I mean,
Personal.
Right,
I
right.
do
So
that
then
all
to
the
your
time.
point, right, I mean,
Yeah,
what
wait,
would,
but just to be clear, this pertains to personal pages
I
that are
understand.
started for official town purposes.
So like my
well,
supervisor
not really.
page.
This pertains to personal pages as well, right? I mean, I can't use a
Right.
personal page to to disclose confidential information or to mislead the statements about the town or reference my former office. So, but what I'm trying to understand what you're getting at is to Tara's point, in the corporate world, if you're a regulated entity, you have to capture and retain all business-related communications. Now, there are certain forms of communication, like text messaging, that aren't easily captured, especially if they're on personal phones. But the corporate policy then says you shall not conduct company business on your phone. And so at least there's a policy so that the employer is doing what it's supposed to be doing. I guess the question you're asking is, if we're allowed to communicate town business on Facebook, then what is the town's obligation to capture that?
Well, it's really what is our obligation? Because from what I understand, as public officials, we are responsible for retaining our own communications about town-related matters.
Right, so
So this
your
would be
point is
our
we
obligation.
should then potentially say in our policy that as officials, it's our obligation to preserve anything that relates to town business, would be what you're saying, I think.
That's what I'm asking.
Yep.
Yeah.
I get it.
And that is what I believe the town of Fishkill has on for their social media policy. So, I mean,
So
whether
does that
we
mean
say-
you
whether
can't
we say-
edit anything that you post then?
I don't know. That's why I'm posing the question. So whether we require it or not, it might fall under the law, under sunshine law, open meetings law.
Yeah, I don't think it becomes a record of the town unless it's in the town's possession. So if it's out on social media, the town has no ability to preserve it, to delete it, to do anything with it. It's in a different medium.
But do
So-
we have that obligation as town officials?
Yeah, I mean, sorry to go down a rabbit hole, but what if someone went on their Facebook Messenger and started messaging a vendor and saying, I don't really like the contract terms, let's negotiate or let's discuss or something like that.
And the question is it a record? That
I don't know. I mean, yes, that's what
that-
Vicky's.
I
It
mean,
looks
that-
like
that's
there's
what I'm getting at. That's the
archiving
question.
entities for government bodies to archive their social media. So there's third parties that specialize in this, similar to what you were just talking about in terms of corporate.
I mean, our town's policy, the IT policy, right, for town employees, surely says Rob can't go on his personal LinkedIn page and start negotiating. He has to do that through his Newcastle email.
Yeah, everyone is instructed that their personal emails or frankly any messaging platform shouldn't be used for town business. You have an email account, and that should be used exclusively.
So maybe the simple answer is what everyone's doing on their Facebook pages is not town business. Jeremy's got a Facebook page that says town council member, he's posting, but he's not conducting town business, therefore it's not a town record. That'd be the way I would think about it.
I think it's something that deserves further exploration.
I think
Yeah, we gotta
that,
think about it.
in my experience with open meetings law, it's not about simply conducting the business of the organization, it's about communications as well. So you can get a FOIL request on your communications with various members of the community on a certain topic.
And I think we should just
Right.
check and see what
Yeah,
the
let's
open government
just
So
says.
sorry, I
think
didn't mean
about
to open
this
a
legal
can of
question.
worms, but.
Yeah, no,
this
that's
is-
why we're here, where it's a work session.
Good point.
All right, we'll look at that.
Okay.
We should
All
just
right,
take a
we'll
look
look
at
into
it.
it.
We can discuss it until ever, but the reality is that if the Committee on Open Governments has ruled on it, it's what they have.
Okay, so we'll look at
Okay.
it.
Those were all my questions.
Jill had brought up a really good point, and she is right, that as one of the unacceptable content, it says content related to a political candidacy, party, or ballot measure. And do you mind if I'm talking for you?
No, go ahead. I have a couple of other ones too, so we'll see how well you remember.
And because there might be a situation if we need to do something, let's say I don't know,
Leasing property.
we're leasing property, and that needs to be on a ballot. It needs either a
Subject to a
shareholder or a
permissive
resident
referendum.
or a school board voter. It's permissive referendum. we might want to be able to say, hey, this is why we're putting this forward, and this is why we think it's a good idea. Now, I think that's different from saying, vote no on Prop 1 about redistricting, so maybe we just say, instead of, we just say, or state or federal ballot measure, instead of local.
Then what if all five don't agree? Can you still advocate for the position?
Well, you
Going in
wouldn't,
circles here. I mean, right? Because if we, is that right, Ed? If we don't agree, then how could you?
This doesn't say, it just says any content relating.
These examples here, this is grouped with, defamatory and personal attacks. These are the list of things that are never okay.
But I'm confused, and I thought Lisa's asking.
it's on, his mic's on.
I thought you were asking how you could make it acceptable in certain situations.
Well, no, this is saying you're never allowed, and
Right.
we may want to say, hey, there's a referendum on this, please make sure to vote. And it's important because it will determine whatever, and it's not necessarily even advocating for a position. It's just saying, we're gonna put in our newsletter, make sure you vote, one way or the other. This is just saying you can't even say anything, that it's even exists.
Right, well, I guess it would be, you should be able to say, just vote, not editorialize at all on what the issue is, but here's the proposition, and vote on X date. Right, why couldn't you do that?
Except for incidental
Because right now it
explanations
says you
and-
can't.
Right, that's what I'm saying,
That's
so I
the
agree with
change.
that.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good change.
So I would just add the word state or federal.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there were a couple of other ones along the same lines. On the acceptable content for the social media page, it's on page 2. We talk about announcements of civic, cultural, charitable. I would add not-for-profit educational events,
Yeah.
okay? And as we discussed earlier, our boards and commissions each have their own Facebook page. So, if this is something that the board is okay with, for them to take and push out advertisement about their upcoming meetings, events that they're hosting, programs of interest, then that's fine, but then we do have to modify the social media and communication platform section to reflect that it wouldn't be just a sole Newcastle Police Department Facebook page or Town of Newcastle Facebook page, but also these individual boarding commissions. And I'm not sure exactly what the how that verbiage should run, but just to allow them that's okay. But that would be different than a boarding commission that has its own independent Facebook page. Right now, the way our website works is that
You mean
we-
website, own individual website.
I'm sorry, website.
Okay.
Webpage.
I apologize. I was going to correct it, and I ended up making a mess of it, so I apologize. So right now, our boards and commissions each have their own page on on our town website, and we would like that to continue. They can be given multiple pages. We, don't limit the number of pages that are available to them, but we would very much like them to be under the umbrella of the town, to appear on the town website only, not have their own independent websites, so that there is a collective spot where the public can come, learn all about our boards and commissions, and if they're ours, they're operating under our auspices, they should in fact be on the town's website and the town's website only. So I'd like to just sort of right the ship in that regard.
I totally agree with regard to boards and commissions. The only place I see that might be different is as it relates to Chat Pack, which is not the Arts and Culture Committee. That should be under the town website, but Chat Pack does have its own website that puts forth, upcoming events, things like that.
Yeah, Chat Pack's a little bit unique. It is a town facility, but it is almost like operating as an independent entity.
Right. So maybe we can just carve that out.
Yeah, I would definitely asterisk that out.
Yeah.
Well, it's not exactly a board or commission.
No,
It's
it's
a
not.
performance
Yeah.
venue, so,
Right.
Maybe there's a different way of thinking about that.
Right. So, okay.
Okay, Facebook page. Unacceptable content, on page 2, the bottom half of the page. solicitation of donations or fundraising. Ed, does this prohibit us from advertising the Chappaqua School Foundation? And all of those other
Or the scholarship fund?
scholarship foundations?
Yeah, in my view, if there's the use of a social media platform to push out information about an event, a town event that's connected
Not a
with
town event.
If it's just
A civic event,
if a civic event, I
or
think
not-for-profit.
is appropriate.
It's
But
a not-for-profit,
if it's
but
a
it's-
not-for-profit that's simply trying to raise funds for its cause, then the answer is probably no. But we like to take these on a case-by-case basis.
So
The idea
if
would be an
it's-
event available to the public is a matter of public interest, whereas an organization just wanting to raise money and saying, put a banner on your e-newsletter to help us raise money is really a solicitation of fundraising or donation.
Right, but I'm not sure that we're making that distinction there.
Would it make sense to have a carve-out for town and school-related organizations? I know the school district has that kind of carve-out for communications that go out from different organizations. So there's a carve-out for school-related organizations as opposed to
Yeah, I mean, we do-
not-for-profit,
Right.
non-related.
So Ed, can you think about how, like, we would want to be able to advertise, for instance, the, event that was held last night where the school is having, a famous chef come and you can cook with the chef and your money's going, to help.
Sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, it was.
It was good.
But we want to distinguish that from I'm raising money for the American Cancer Society, and while that's a great, charity, we don't want to have everyone who's raising money for their individual charities putting ads in there, right? Is that the difference?
Yeah, we just have to be a little bit careful, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, we support Relay for Life, so
We do.
that's-
But that's school-related. I've had it,
That's
I
good.
have done this.
I mean, it's a school club.
Yeah.
Can you just play with?
We're
I-
supporting
But that
I know
might
what we
tell
wanna
people
do, I
to
just
go
don't-
to Relay for Life is different than saying send money
But we're
here.
supporting the school club as opposed to Relay for Life, the organization. We're
Right.
supporting the club,
These are
We don't
always.
really make that distinction when we.
but you could make.
These are always tricky distinctions, and that's why I say we like to take them on a case-by-case basis. I actually looked at trying to put a finer point on that one, and it's really,
Sorry.
I know
Our-
it used to be a distinction that the PTA used to make. My experience with that way back when, we used to get asked as a PTA to advertise certain charitable events. And so the carve-out would be only for school-related or
Right, I know
town-related
the school does
events.
that, but it's just.
So
they
to
u-
me,
they-
this is
But you
quite-
don't do town-related, you don't advertise town things.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is not really hard, because I've seen that and I've done that before.
The concept you're trying to get across is of general interest and utility to the town or the school district, as opposed to individual causes that any number of residents, for very valid reasons, might want to promote.
Right.
Or events that really don't benefit the residents of the town. If someone is hosting an event at Sleepy Hollow Country Club, it's not really, so I think to me that would be a valid distinction as well. For the American Cancer Society,
All right, so we need to think about that. And then also on the same lines, commercial advertising that promotes a specific event. Again, if we're promoting an event at Chapac, we kind of want to be able to put that on there.
yeah, if it's a town-sponsored event, for sure.
Okay.
this doesn't say event.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is fine.
Maybe we want to say not sponsored by the town or something there.
Maybe we could just tweak it, okay.
Yeah.
And my last peeve, which is just that, I just think this should apply to current board members. I don't think we should put anything in here that is blatantly unenforceable. I think it dilutes the value of the policy, and
What are you referring to?
the last section, or the second to last section, pages 3 to 4. There's no other social media policy around that deals with former board members. I just think it weakens the strength of the document, and the document's actually really important. I'm thrilled that you guys are doing this. From where Carrie and I are sitting, and Rob, who have to make decisions on a regular basis as to what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, not just for the newsletter, but, triangle signs, banners, things like that. We are, as the success of the newsletter has expanded, so has those entities who approach us for inclusion in the newsletter. And it's really helpful to us to have some real clear guidelines as to what's acceptable and what's not, because it makes our jobs so much easier. And I think it strengthens the e-newsletter, not having peripheral things in it. But I am concerned that we're diluting the document by putting something in here that we know we can't enforce. And I think that if we start this policy now and we change the culture by this is acceptable and that's not, then it just carries over. But I don't think we should be, targeting or including former board members. I think that you address the people that you have jurisdiction over, that you have authority over, and you just run with that.
Well, this could apply to current board members. I mean, we change positions within the town board. That can happen.
Right, well, you are saying it should be there for current, but not former.
Right, current, not
But,
former.
but if you,
It doesn't,
but if you apply it now, going forward, and we as town board members adhere to this policy, right? And we're saying that when we vacate our positions going forward, we agree to adhere to a policy that we will not reference our prior position in a manner that could create the appearance of having authority. I don't see how that's, and then
It's a
just
very subjective.
let me finish the last point. This is not something that anyone could be sued under. Anyone could, right? So to say it's blatantly unenforceable, i.e. unconstitutional, I think is what you're saying. I don't see that. I don't think a public official saying, again, ex ante going forward, I'm agreeing, if I serve on this board, in the future, I won't reference my prior position in a way that could reasonably create the appearance of having official authority.
And who's the arbiter? You
But
and I
also-
can have a conversation.
I'd be happy to.
Only because it's 9:30.
Yeah, no,
we
I'd
still
be
have
happy
an
to.
hour's left.
You use the
Yeah,
words,
but
you use
this
the words
even-
blatantly unenforceable and diluting the whole
but
efficacy
that's
of
not, but the
policy.
point I was making is that you can have a former office while continuing to serve on the town board. So for instance, I could not be deputy supervisor next year. I could be simply a town board member. So I wouldn't reference myself as a former deputy supervisor. Or Lisa could decide to remain on the town board and
Right.
not be supervisor.
But you could
So
leave
this-
the board in 2 years, right?
So what?
Create a
well,
Facebook page that says Victoria Tip, Deputy Supervisor, and publish information, right?
But I
And-
could be on the board and reference myself as former whatever.
No, I understand. I guess,
the
But
point is
then
that
you're
you can
still on
still
the
have-
board, so that's not as
So there's
big an
still,
issue.
but this is worded in a way that would address people
Yeah.
currently on the board.
I just think so. I understand what you're saying, Jill, and while we didn't want to restrict people generally, the reason why we took a lot of care with that language and said you can't speak in a way that's going to reasonably, I can't find it, hold on. What section, where, I can't find it, but that's going to reasonably.
Page 4.
Oh, yes, reasonably create the appearance of having official authority or access to information unavailable to the public at large. Not, you want to post, you were a former council member, and here's the COVID guidelines that are available to anyone who cares to look on the Westchester County website. Go for it. But you want to somehow, I mean, it's weird, but you can go for it. But this is saying if you want to, but you shouldn't say anything that has the appearance of having official authority or access to information available to the public at large. So somebody posts, as the former supervisor, I know that they're giving out masks today. Run, don't walk to this place. And now they're causing accidents because they're saying it and people are reasonably believing they have information that I don't have. right? That is not okay. But to say, hey, I'm forwarding the town's post on this, that's not doing that. But to put something out there, let's say before anyone else puts it out there, because maybe you do have inside information or you've heard something, and to do that with then the appearance that one could reasonably create the appearance of having official authority or access to on non-public information. That's what we're saying, not generally. You want to go out and post that you were the former supervisor or former town board member, okay, but it can't be in a way that's basically giving you
Who's making that
reasonably authority.
I know, but who's making that determination?
Well, all of this is gray. Again, this is giving guidelines about what to do, and yeah,
There's gray and there's really gray.
I don't think this is that gray.
I'll just very quickly add, let's deal with things we can enforce, and to your point, Jill, you can't enforce it. There's nothing you can do to someone who's formerly on the town board. You can't report it to the ethics committee. If they commit some sort of offense of some kind, they may be liable personally, whatever that may be.
Well,
if at all.
but then
So
again-
I think that let's stick with what we can do. Let's tighten it up, and
My opinion.
let's deal with what we have in front of us. And
But
This
let's
is
say that
going- this is
person
going
decides to
forward.
run again, okay? And now you say, you know what? This person couldn't even abide by a policy where they're actually trying to mislead the public. That's something that you shouldn't be able, this is supposed to get at, don't mislead the public.
Yeah, but whether or not they misled the public is the point. And that would be valid.
right.
the public make that determination.
Right.
whether they-
Well, you know what, we don't have to get into all that. I think
I-
the point is,
this is-
that
this
we're
is-
moving forward. This is
This
moving
is one
forward,
point
right?
on this entire policy.
Yeah,
I personally don't feel tremendously strong about it. I definitely don't agree with the sort of the legal analysis that a board sitting here today can't sign on to that as part of a code of conduct going forward. But I personally, I think, you know, it's
I
to
agree.
me,
I
to me, it's the 19th out of the 20 points we're trying to address in this thing.
Yeah,
So,
and I think it's about moving forward. It's not
yeah.
trying to reach
So I
back.
take,
It's
I take
about,
Jill's point to heart.
yeah, I think it's about current town board members sitting here now agreeing to this in the future. And I don't think we can
It is.
enforce it, but I don't have a problem with, you know, having some sort of ethical obligation to follow
Right.
the policy.
Ready for the next one?
That's it.
Yep.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, Ed, are you going to be able to make the changes to this? You think the 15th we'll put it back on? Or you want to leave it for the 1st?
We can do it.
Lisa, what are your thoughts?
For the 15th? Yeah, I think so.
Okay, do 15?
Right, Ed?
Sure.
All right, we still have, Kellen, are you still with us? Poor guy.
I'm still here.
Hey!
Hey.
It's past my bedtime, so I'm really impressed with this. So Kellen is here tonight. This is going to be one of several resolutions that you are going to be presented with. It has to do with our EV chargers and the reimbursement that we're receiving from Con Ed from the Make Ready program. So Kellen, can I turn it over to you? Very short.
Absolutely.
promise.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. I will be very brief with my presentation. It's only 3 slides, so I'm going to share my screen. And
If he gives 3 slides or less for PowerPoint presentations. Yeah, well, yeah.
bear
can I do
with
it too?
me.
I can name that in one.
So everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yep, thank you.
Fantastic. So just a brief kind of update on where we're at with the electric vehicle charging stations. So we have the NYSERDA Charge Ready reimbursement, which we applied for, which is the actual charging stations themselves. And we've secured funding for that. And then the Con Ed Make Ready reimbursement, which Jill spoke to just now. And so those are the 2 programs that the town has applied for. And the Make Ready reimbursement, as Jill said, there are 5 locations that we're applying for. So those are the 10 stations. We've ordered the stations, and they're going to be at these 5 locations. So just a brief overview on where that is. And then So where we're at with the Charge Ready program, so as I mentioned before, we're pre-approved for all 10 chargers. That's 20 plugs. They're L2s, level 2s, and the reimbursement is $4,000 a plug or $80,000, which is about 2/3 of the total charger cost itself. So we ordered the chargers in December, and there are delays due to material, labor shortages. I've heard that Rice Krispies are hard to get a hold of now, so I'm assuming that this will materialize and move forward within the next few weeks. I'm in weekly, if not every few day, contact with the ChargePoint representative, who gives me updates. And once those chargers are shipped, I will be tracking them so I can intercept them when they come in. And so, because of this, we had a March 1st deadline to have these chargers installed. I reached out to NYSERDA. They're granting extensions until April 30th. Because this is a fairly prevalent issue with the program and with the material shortages, and especially ChargePoint is one of the largest producers and suppliers of EV chargers. So if they're having issues, I imagine that a lot of these charging electric vehicle charging companies are having these issues. And so my last slide, with the reimbursement agreement that you have, resolution tonight. Sorry, it's getting late for me. Words are hard when it's late. The Con Ed Make Ready program, formerly Power Ready. So, as the slide reads, we can apply up to the five locations. 90% is reimbursable of the infrastructure work up to the station itself, and so the town has completed all of the infrastructure work that we had to do for all 5 locations, thanks to Dan Rubino, the town electrician, and all the guys that helped out from DPW. They did the heavy lift on this. And so I have submitted for 3 of the 5 locations to be reimbursed for that 90%. Those locations are Millwood Park. I know you were speaking about that earlier. That's another improvement there. Amsterdam Park, and the charger next to Bank of America, right next to the electric sign there. And so the resolution tonight focuses on Amsterdam Park. We have that agreement, and they're offering to reimburse us up to 90%. And so that agreement is with council. They're reviewing it. And then the last update I wanted to give is Con Ed. For those last 2 locations, Con Ed may need to complete some upgrades for those 2 locations. Completely on the utility side, the town does not have to, from my understanding, do anything. Just depending on if they have the actual, capacity to support, the 6 stations that are going into the Chappaqua train station, or the one that's going into town hall, because they have to look. I think it's with their engineers currently, and I actually have a call with them on Thursday to double check to see where they are with those applications. So I know that was a lot of information really quickly. If anyone has any questions.
So basically, we're getting back just shy of $5,000.
Yes.
Yep. So we applied so the total cost for Amsterdam Park was around $5,400. We're hitting the $4,900, which is right at the 90%.
I'm very familiar with the program. My firm is actually engaged in it as well, and there's significant allocations on the part of Con Ed for this Make Ready program. I wonder if there's opportunities elsewhere in the town that we might consider for this as well, because the infrastructure piece is sort of it's a one-time deal, right? And we're seeing just an incredible shift in terms of transportation electrification. We're going to need more than probably the chargers that we're looking at.
Right, so we've got chargers at Gedney, now we're at Amsterdam, we're also putting them at Millwood Park, where we'd never had them before. So this is our first, what we hope is our first phase of introducing EV chargers into town. Kellen has been checking with NYSERDA to see, we're hoping that the program is reintroduced, and we'll be able to get additional chargers, and then we'll move on with Con Ed to see what other infrastructures that we can do. So I think there's Glacier, maybe Whippoorwill Park, but a lot of people have been mentioning to us, a private private-public partnership. So there was some comment made about Chappaqua Crossing, but, again, we have no jurisdiction over that. There was even discussion as to school district properties. Again, town has no jurisdiction over that. One of the things I'm going to be bringing back to the board is we have been approached by Tesla, who would like to install Tesla chargers in town, in our public parking lots, and I will talk to the board about the pros and cons of that. Not tonight, but at another meeting, okay?
The non-proprietary plugs.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say the non-proprietary plugs are usually the
They are proprietary.
Bird.
They are
Yes,
proprietary
yes.
plugs, that's the
yeah,
problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
They will be giving us an equal number of non-proprietary plugs that we could use as well. But they're, anyway,
Yeah, I do think
we'll discuss.
I wonder if
There's-
as a town we're allowed to do that. But anyway, that's for another.
No, the town is actually allowed to do, the council has cleared it
has,
for
yeah.
us. And if you drive through town, just a fun fact, the Tesla dealership in Mount Kisco is the second largest grossing Tesla dealership in the country.
wow,
San Francisco's the first.
amazing.
So that's why they're interested in coming to town. Drive down King Street any day and watch the procession of Teslas.
That's why I bought a Polestar.
We like to
Sorry,
do that,
just-
right. I do think the NYSERDA funding will come back into play.
Oh,
So-
we're confident it will. It's a fabulously popular program, and Kellen did a great job securing the tent for us, and we are lucky enough to have an in-house electrician, which really made the electrical expenditures very reasonable. But otherwise, it would have been, there would have been another $5,000 of expenditures that we would have had to absorb for each one of these. So it's
Great.
Dan is just a fabulous.
Kellen, great job for getting that in early, because they actually just significantly reduced the incentives, as you're probably aware,
yes.
so.
Yep, and they ran out of money.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great
for-
job.
NYSERDA
Thank you.
definitely ran out of money.
Portion of
Yeah,
it is-
yeah, they were a victim of their own success. Anyway, thank you so much, Kellen.
Thank
Any
you
other
so
Thanks,
much,
Kellen.
Helen.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
Jill, did you say Whippoorwill Park and Glacier?
Glacier.
Yeah, I know Glacier. Is that a
No,
done?
that would be on the next round. We haven't done it for this one.
Okay, I'm just wondering, given how strapped parking is at both of those, that seems to be a,
That would be our next ones. But before I do that, I really would like to put some
yeah.
cameras in the place. Frankly, that would be higher on my list. But yeah.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so last discussion item is authorization to approve the IMA with Westchester County regarding the installation of the water main along with the 120. So the board may or may not recall that Westchester County has decided to extend the sewer trunk line that runs up 120. Right now, it ends at Hunts Lane. It would go from Hunts Lane up to Wagon Road Camp, up 120. It is a significant project. It will rip up all of 120, which isn't a great thing, but it will extend sewer service up to Wagon Road Camp, which fulfills a decades-long promise to Wagon Road Camp from the county. It will also offer sewer service to those homes along 120, and does give the town an opportunity, with the permission of 51% of residents, to propose smaller sewer districts and extend sewer service along that area, if that's something that the town wants to pursue. But let me just go back for a moment. So we have infrastructure that could use replacement. There's a water main that runs alongside of the sewer trunk line that's proposed. And while that road is being ripped up, we are piggybacking with the county to take in, install a new water main along 120 to try to minimize what will be a tremendous amount of disruption to the residents along there. It'll also save the town considerable sums, since there will be excavation trucks on site already, and when it comes to paving, it'll reduce the costs to the town. So this is the IMA with the county. It's been vetted by council. We're finally at a spot where we're ready to sign, and so it's for the board's approval tonight. Does anybody have any questions?
What's the approximate timing for this project?
They are actually planning on starting it later this year or early next year. I believe they're at 90% completion plans. They were waiting on us because the plans have to be altered somewhat to allow for certain distances are required between the sewer's trunk line and the town's water main. So,
And how long do you think a project like this would take, just so that residents could get an idea of what
I'm not
we're
sure.
all in for?
We're not really driving the bus on this project, so.
Just a ballpark.
But we'll certainly gonna, once
Yeah.
we know more, we will absolutely communicate with residents and make
I-
sure that they know
I
exactly.
wouldn't want people to start panicking, now or be concerned about it.
No.
It's certainly, within the next 5 years, it'll be finished, but I don't know when they're starting, so.
Okay.
Are there implications, looking at the legislation that we were discussing earlier, with regard to extending the sewer lines that we should be considering, or?
There could be.
There could be. A decision to install additional sewer districts or to create sewer districts is not the town's alone. Even if we wanted to extend sewer service to every resident in all the side streets along 120, it would require a 51% vote of the residents in that area. If the town was gung-ho and was absolutely ready to go, and we couldn't get the votes, the answer would be no. And when you create a sewer district, it's an additional, expense for those residents. There's the initial capital cost of the installation of the sewers, and then there's an ongoing O&M, which is, operations and maintenance that go with that even after the capital project is paid off. So this is a continuing expense for those homeowners. So it doesn't come cheap. It's, generally at least another $1,000 onto someone's tax bill for a sewer. So,
I'll tell you, if that ADU legislation passes, it might make people rethink their desire for
Yeah.
sewers.
That's what I was referencing.
Yeah, it's funny, this is, the first time, well, it's not the first time, but installation of sewers has always been a double-edged sword because of the cost associated with it. But this is just another consideration that, people will look at. But again, the county's decision to install the sewer trunk was not contingent upon the town's approval or unapproval. This is a state road, this is their infrastructure. It was not a town decision. It was a county decision. Okay. The last couple of items are just administrative. One is a recycling resolution. It actually has to do with the climate smart communities and our attempt to secure some additional funding. And so it's a statement of the town's commitment to recycling. The resolution is in the packet. And last but not least is an authorization to establish a capital project, and this is for some of the larger equipment that we are planning on purchasing this year. This has been provided for in our financial planning. It's the purchase of a street sweeper, a front loader for the highway department. So I should let Rob speak on this, the creation of capital projects. Rob, why don't you pick it up from here?
So it's actually, I think it's 3 vehicles. I think they added the heavy dump.
Yes, they did. But it's just, I think they're just authorizing the purchase of just the one.
Right. So creating the capital project, the board is authorizing the creation of the capital project. We're intending to borrow that money. I think it's about $725,000 total for the three vehicles. That's, if you look in the back of the budget, that's part of the operating budget every year, as we include the capital projects that we intend to go forward with. So there's 2 sections of that capital budget. There's one that are projects that we're currently working on, and there's projects under consideration, which these fall under. The projects under consideration, we typically have a estimated budget, because a lot of times we don't know exactly what, kind of as a placeholder, we don't know exactly what we're going to spend. So once those kind of come into focus, that's when we kind of move them into the projects that we're currently working on. I'm going to update the board Probably, I would say late spring, probably early summer. We typically borrow money every 3 to 4 years with the town. We last borrowed in February of 2018, and we're going to have quite a few projects to borrow for this time around. One of them will be the Route 120, the water main there. We have cement relining. We have the work that we did at Millwood Park that's outside of the SAM grant. We have the roof at the community center, these vehicles. I'll have a full listing for the board, but we typically wait until we have the costs a little more in focus, in particular with the Route 120. That's going to be one of the more expensive projects that we've done in a while. And I have to get closer to that number before I just go out there and just borrow a lump sum of money. If I borrow too much, then I've got money sitting around that's not doing anything. If I don't borrow enough, then I've got to either dip into the operating funds or go back and borrow again, which we saw with the downtown project. We'll be forced to make a decision there whether we use fund balance or borrow additional monies to finish that project. So this is just one of the projects that's under consideration right now, and I think the lead time on these is about at least a year now, maybe closer to 2 years before we get any of these vehicles. So that's why we're doing this sooner rather than later.
Okay.
All right, well, that's it for the work session. You want to
Thanks,
look
Bob.
down the board?
No, actually, we skipped the first thing, which
Yes,
was the
you did.
supervisor's update, so I just wanted to update the board on a couple things while we're in work session. The first is hopefully by next week, I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot, Ed, we'll be coming to you with proposed agreement terms for Chap Pack and the Westchester Theater that I'm hoping we can discuss and at least approve in concept so that they can both apply for their liquor license and begin to book their upcoming shows. So that's kind of time sensitive. But we're in a good place, so we'll present that to the board, but that's coming up. So I would say put that on for next week. Also for next week, I don't want to devote time to this tonight because we've had quite a long work session. But last week we talked about potentially renaming the CRE. And based upon sort of feedback I got, I almost sent this to the board over the weekend, but I decided I'd just wait. I'd like to discuss instead forming a separate LGBTQ plus committee and changing the CRE to the Committee on Race, Equity, and Inclusion. And keeping in mind that, as I previously stated, the work of the Committee on Race and Equity is critical, and I know that no one on this board intends to dilute that mandate. Instead, we can continue our discussion next time. No decisions are being made right now about expanding and not diluting the mandate to advance and foster inclusion for all disenfranchised populations in our town, to actively encourage a robust cross-section of voices to help further our work in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we'll talk about that more at the next work session, but I wanted to just put that out there for the board. And that's all I had.
Okay, perfect.
So does anyone have any other things they need to bring up?
What about community corner?
That's in the meeting. Yep. Okay, so then can we adjourn the work session? Can I have a motion to adjourn the work session?
Move to adjourn work session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Does anyone need a short bathroom break
We need
before we
5
start the
minutes.
meeting? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break before we convene the town board meeting.
Jill, did we get a separate?
Remember our estimates?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the belated board meeting of Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. I am sorry we are running behind, but for those of you who tuned in, we had a lot to talk about in our work session, and there was some very good discussion. So we are going to start out with some announcements. Oh, wait, can I get a motion to open the meeting?
I move to open the public meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Still getting the hang of this a little bit. Okay, so we're going to start out with some announcements. So for those of you who were paying attention who were watching the work session, one of the things we talked about was North Greeley zoning options. So I just wanted to discuss one issue that was raised at a recent public meeting because I don't want this overtaken by politics. And that is just the identity and motivation of certain campaign donors to the Unite Newcastle team during last year's campaign. As most of you know, the names of all donors to our campaign and to that of our opponents are available for public review. One resident has pointed out numerous times on Facebook posts, in a letter to the editor, and now at a recent town board meeting, that certain of our donors are either involved in real estate development and or do not reside in Newcastle. This resident has expressed puzzlement as to why these people might have contributed to our campaign. I noted during the discussion that a town board meeting was not the time or place to discuss the matter. This line of commentary is simply politics and not something that will be allowed to distract the town board from doing its job. However, so that we can move on, I will use this one occasion to clarify my remarks. To the extent there was an actual question posed, the answer is simple. There is no discussion to be had. Individuals donate to political candidates for myriad reasons, including friendship, respect, concern for their community, and advocacy of a particular position. Inasmuch as our donors' names are public, anyone can certainly try to ask them directly if they so choose. They are more than capable of speaking for themselves. But in my book, and that of Victoria, Tara, and Chris, having the support of concerned residents, friends, and former colleagues who in some cases happen to have expertise and experience in real estate, but in all cases care about Newcastle and its future, is something we take pride in and do not need to explain. As for myself and my fellow town board members who are part of the Unite Newcastle slate, whatever actions we take in the future will stand or fall on their own. All residents are welcome to judge as they see fit. Okay, so I just wanted to put that out there. I have nothing in Supervisor's report, but there's going to be a lot in tomorrow's newsletter, so stay tuned for a very enthralling read. Now for our community corner, we have a few things to announce. I actually love this segment of our new segment because it really makes me feel connected to the town. So people wrote in, and I am very proud to announce that on January 23rd, 2022, the Greeley boys indoor soccer track and field team won the Westchester County Championship, placing first out of 31 teams. We believe this is the first time in the history of the championship that Greeley has won the competition. The meet is held annually at the Armory in Washington Heights, an Olympic caliber venue. And then on January 31st, that same team also won the league championships at the Armory, so congratulations. And also congratulations to the Greeley wrestling team for winning the 2022 league championships. Both teams are amazing, so congratulations. Also, happy belated 13th birthday to Thomas Gorkin. He turned 13 on February 3rd. Even though you already turned 13, we are still going to put your name on that board tomorrow, so please look for it on the electronic board in front of Bell. And happy 50th birthday on February 13th to Charlie Harris. And Audrey and Benjamin and the town of Newcastle are wishing you a wonderful day and a big, big birthday. So that is our community corner. Make sure to please keep writing in. I love seeing those. Some people write to me on Facebook, but you can write at communitycorner@mynewcastle.org, and we will get them and put everything in the next public meeting. Okay, so now we can move to the administrator's report.
Yep, just a couple things, none as exciting as yours, unfortunately. Just a quick reminder that there is no overnight parking on our public roads from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. through April. This ensures that our DPW can clear the roads without having to navigate around cars parked and blocking our roadways. Good news, bad news regarding our Gedney bathrooms. We had our septic pumped at Gedney this morning, and we found out that the septic pumps had failed. This means that the bathrooms will be closed until further notice. However, I do believe that the porta-johns will be installed this week. They may even be there tomorrow morning. So we apologize for the inconvenience, and we're on it. And last but not least, that there's going to be mandatory training for staff and elected officials covering the topics of sexual harassment prevention training, as well as workplace violence prevention training. It's going to be virtual, and it's going to be Monday, February 14th. Do we know how to celebrate Valentine's Day or what? At 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And on March 16th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and also March 2nd. These will be circulated for everyone. The staff all knows about it. We'll be circulating it.
But we only need to attend one of those.
You need to attend two.
One for sexual harassment precedent and one
Yes.
for, yes.
If you attend them at your work, your day jobs, I just need certificates of completion, okay? And then you're excused, okay? And so the links will go around, just to let you guys know. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Jill.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we will open up the meeting to public comment and new business, if there is any. There is actually nobody sitting in this town hall with us today, so I'm going to assume we may have someone on Zoom. Hi, Maggie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great. Welcome.
Okay, hi. I wanted to make some comments on the North Greeley corridor topic. I didn't know any of the details. I only saw it on the agenda, so what I'm about to say is off the top of my head. I heard mention of how to engage people, how to engage the community, how to reach the community, and frankly, the suggestions made me nauseous because they're just doing the same thing that was done in the lead up to the form-based code. I heard mention of going back to the 2014-2017 comp plan situation, mention of, putting something in the water bill. There was talk of surveys. I know there was no survey in the form-based code because supposedly a survey couldn't be done, but there was one done for the police reform. And I did see a meeting after that survey was done that the return had been disappointing, in the words of the committee members, people who filled out the survey. Using town email, people don't get that much from it. And I speak from experience. You really have to, what's going to create something in this community that's going to be of value and fit this community and be supported and sustainable by the community, is going to take focus, persistence, and creative thinking. And I urge you to break free from the cycle that created a lot of problems in the form-based code in terms of outreach. I heard mention of consultants coming in. There may be a time for consultants, but consultants start to define the process and the problem. They're out of town often. They're out of touch for what this community wants. Please step away from that cycle. It will not get the results that will make this our future special. There are a lot of people in this town. You have a second problem aside from revitalization of North Greeley, which is a community that is very disheartened by what they saw. Some people supported the form-based code, I know, but you didn't hear many people say that. What you heard were people saying they did not support it or they were unhappy with the process. And this includes the people who reside in the downtown. Those people are at ground zero for being impacted by what happens in North Greeley, and they felt very marginalized and very unheard. So that cycle of outreach techniques that were mentioned created a second problem that you also have to deal with now, and it didn't get good results. So please think creatively. There is no substitute for one-on-one engagement with people. Being in a room with people, I was at, our not-for-profit table week after week after week, because I learned that was the way to make progress. And to get people to hear what people wanted in this community, to hear their concerns, to get them to pay attention. And that took a lot of effort on my part, but it was important because it mattered. And I think there's no substitute for that type of one-on-one engagement. Getting people in a room is far different than a Zoom meeting. A Zoom meeting's useful, but when you see who else is in the room, when you see your friend or neighbors there, and you can talk to them, and you can maybe have coffee later on, that's how word starts to spread, and that's how people get engaged. So please, what I heard as I started out saying, I was quite disheartened by what I heard tonight in terms of reaching the community. I think it would be a grievous lost opportunity. And that's my first comment. My second comment is whatever you have to, whatever approach you start to focus on with North Greeley, think that if it can be replicated elsewhere to the advantage of developers, it will be replicated. And I mean that it may set a precedent. I don't know if it's spot zoning or not for those, for Rite Aid and the Hakeem property. I think it's about 1.8 acres in total. But there are other places in town that are about the same size, and I start to get concerned that if it's good on North Greeley, it could be good elsewhere. And that may include, by the way, the Children's Aid Society. I know they own a lot of acreage there. Maybe they'll want to develop something. When sewers go, development follows. So you have to keep in mind that maybe the entire portion land, or maybe a portion of land will be sold someday for development once the sewers are in. Now, if that's okay with you, fine, but keep it in mind in terms of community planning. Piecemeal approach to me is not ideal. Maybe that's all we can achieve right now. But I would urge you to also come up with a good plan for how we're going to approach the future. And that's it.
Thanks, Maggie. And don't be disheartened. We're going to do our very best to do it right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maggie.
Well, I do know that's your intent, but I'm giving you the perspective from somebody who is listening today, who speaks from experience, and I really was disheartened by the techniques for community outreach I heard mentioned. It's just the same old thing. So I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. And thanks for giving me a chance. I can't believe we're all still awake. So, quick question about what you said about the CRE. I might have missed it. So, it sounded to me like what you were saying was sort of backing off from what you said last week, which was let's just put like LGBTQ and special needs and something else all into one bucket and call it inclusion. And then this week it's, well, no, we're not going to do that. Let's put LGBTQ in its own committee, which actually I think is great. And I think that we do need a committee like that. But then if we're going to do that, which I think should happen, then why mess with the name of the CRE at all? What's the purpose, I guess? My question is, what's the purpose of even messing with the name or changing anything? Can we just get the committee seated and start working on implementing the recommendations that we have and working on creating new recommendations and initiatives in conjunction as well with the other committees.
So, thank you. So, I never said last week that I wanted to fold those who are differently abled under that committee. In fact, I said exactly the opposite. But, you know, when we have a work session, it's really not a time to make decisions. It's a time when we discuss things. So we did, and, you know, I thought I made a proposal. It didn't mean it was going to stick. It didn't mean we weren't going to take input from both town board members and community members. So yes, we did. I did say that based on input, I would prefer the board consider creating a separate committee for LGBTQ+. I do think that most towns that I've looked at, and I've looked at many, 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 most of their committees that are centered on race and equity are centered upon inclusion, and not just for the BIPOC community, which obviously is incredibly important, but also for other communities who feel, and other populations who may feel disenfranchised in our town. So I think that and as I said in my newsletter too, I think that the mandates and the suggestions that were put forth by the Council on Race and Equity are something that did fall a little by the wayside, and we do intend to pick those up and consider all of those recommendations in terms of their implementation. And I don't think that should stop, but I also don't see why, when we're talking about race and equity, we're not looking at inclusion for all of those who may feel disenfranchised within our town.
Well, because, I mean, if we look at the actual charter or mission statement of the Council on Racial Equity, it wasn't meant to be an umbrella organization, though. It was really meant to be focused on people of color. And, you know, we have in this town, you know, obviously we don't have a massive percentage of people of color, but we do have people of color here in this town. And we also have indigenous considerations, specifically around the Buttonhook property, for example. Mm-hmm. And all of these sort of BIPOC related issues, I believe, deserve their own committee. And yes, we're all, I think the CRE, I think that EPIC, I think that the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee, I think that any future LGBTQIA committee, all of those are really about inclusion, right? But I guess I keep coming back to the question of, like, why can't we allow the CRE to be what it specifically is, about racial equity and about the focus on racial equity? That's the core of what the foundation was. That by the way, you seconded the motion yourself. I was heartened to see.
I did, and I participated in working groups
Sure.
as well.
Yeah, I know. And that's awesome. I'm just asking, I guess I just keep asking the question of why are we messing with the structure of it? Let's just let the CRE be what the CRE was intended to be. And like, why are we calling it, why would we say make it an inclusion thing for everybody who feels disenfranchised?
Okay. Well, this is something we're certainly not making a decision on tonight. As you know, I'm sure you heard me say, we're going to continue to discuss this at our next work session. So it's something that we will keep talking about, and I definitely take your comments to heart, and the town board will consider it.
All right. Well, thank you for the consideration. I'll be really interested to hear what everybody else thinks too. Because I'm just really not following the, why that would be necessary. So thanks so much for giving it further consideration.
Yep, no problem. And Cynthia's just a reminder, sometimes with a work session, we put things out there, things we're considering or we want to try out for the town board to discuss, as you saw us do tonight. And, when we see that not many people are applying to be on a committee, we wonder what's wrong with that committee and how we can make sure that its mandate is fulfilled. So, to me, discussing with the board the possibility of opening it up to encourage, a cross-section of voices who may have felt unwelcome earlier, I didn't see a problem with discussing that. And that's all we're doing, is discussing it at this point, and we really appreciate your feedback. So thank you very much.
I'm sorry, one last question though, just to follow up on what you just said. In trying to figure out what's wrong with the committee, how many people of color did you talk to who served on the original committee?
Cynthia, we're having discussions on this, and I have certainly reached out to people on the committee. So thank you. I don't have a number in front of me, but we've reached out to people on the committee, both those who are BIPOC and those like yourself who are not.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Carrie, any other comments?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Cynthia.
Hi, I'm calling for a couple of reasons. I would like to underline thanking the board for pushing through the reinstating of the Millwood West End board. They're already very busy, it seems. And several items on your chart, your 2021 priorities and the review for and updating for 2022 happen to fall within the West End Millwood board territory. And I would like to add one more, a favorite little smile between me and Jeremy over the years, since you've been referring to reviewing the comp plan and things like open space available for possible solar farm opportunities, and the comp plan relative to environmental goals, and the comp plan relative to this new proposal for expanded housing all over New York State. So would you consider adding to your review a more detailed analysis of the environment with regard to trees? Right now you do have a set of tree regulations that have to do with how many trees you can cut down that are healthy without, coming up in front of the town for a request for tree removal. But you don't have a policy for that looks towards environmental sustainability with regard to trees that are not only healthy, but in states of decline or dead, and serving as the fuel for a proper biodiversity environment, biodiverse environment. So could you add that to something to look at to create a policy for trees by area?
We can certainly consider it.
And I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself well, primarily because I'm still drinking coffee at this point to try to keep it together. But the idea is to have a policy that takes into account a comprehensive biodiversity approach to organic matter in forest, wetlands, etc. I would love that to be something to look at.
Okay.
Then I also want to draw your attention to Millwood West End Board, and I'm not on the board, but I'm watching them eagerly, did step up at the Cortland Planning Board session for the Hudson Ridge wellness rehab proposal in Cortland that owns over 20 acres on the Newcastle side, and did a great job. And it seemed that the Cortland Planning Board, when one of the members who showed up to introduce that the Millwood West End Board was paying attention at the with the support of the Newcastle Town Board, the Planning Board of Cortland was quite interested in that. And they were appreciative that that piece of communication has been reinstituted. So thank you very much for that. Last point, there's so many, but for now, the notion of a solar review and the comp plan, a solar farm review and the comp plan. I'm quite nervous about the enthusiasm for solar farms in Westchester County right now. In fact, I think Newcastle is slow to this party, which I appreciate. But towns like Yorktown already have, at any given time, a half dozen solar farm applications in front of the planning board. And it's a little terrifying because there hasn't been enough review of cost benefit when it comes to applying to cut down 500 trees and put up barriers, with regard to local wildlife, and there are pathways through the environment. So there's a lot going on without a clear understanding of the pluses and minuses. And the best that I could find so far is that Bedford seems to be a little more cautious, and they are reviewing and doing cost benefit analysis, just FYI. And I would encourage Newcastle to do the same before, jumping on that bandwagon. That's it for now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I really appreciate your comments.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for staying up so late.
You too.
So, couple of things. First, I heard mention today of a Tesla charger and some hesitation around it. I think it would be a great idea for the town, especially if you're installing level 2 chargers everywhere. Lots of us have Teslas. It'd be nice to have access to some superchargers. If you throw some in the train station, potentially a great way to get people to come to Chappaqua downtown. There's no real superchargers around Westchester. Could bring in some traffic. Electric cars, can't go wrong there. Second thing, any way to get Verizon to give us some better cell service would be fantastic. Just can't seem to get a signal anywhere.
Rob, is your signal still bad? Because they actually fixed it for a lot of people. I've been in contact with them almost daily.
We're over here, the boondocks over by Seven Bridges on Winthrop. Maybe it's the wetlands, but it's tough over here.
Okay, do me a favor. Send me an email on lcats@mynewcastle.org. I think I may already have it, but just again with your name and cell phone number.
No problem. I'm also the guy that's been barking at you about the Verizon poll.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Rob.
So hi, how are you? We got beef with Verizon, but it's okay. The last one, I'm gonna start a charge here. We would like a dog park in Newcastle. Last year, a few of us kind of got together to test the waters here, and we threw out a change.org petition to see what would happen. And in a day, without trying, we got over 400 signatures and 30 comments on it from residents of Newcastle wanting a dog park. Seems like it shouldn't be very political. It shouldn't be too expensive. And we got plenty of land around here. You're welcome to use some of our wetlands behind our house if you need to. But there aren't many places for new residents or residents in general to meet other residents in this town. Lots of us have dogs. Lots of us are sick of being stuck in our houses and would like places to interact with people that are outdoors. And a dog park seems like an easy win. Happy to help lead that charge in any way possible. Happy to get private donations for it. We could probably fund it privately in about a week. So whatever is possible would be great. Those are kind of my big ones tonight for you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great feedback, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for staying up with us and all your comments. Now we are just moving to our consent agenda items. Was there anything that anyone felt like needed to be taken off of our consent agenda? Hearing no takers. Can I get someone to read the resolutions? Do you have it in front of you, Chris?
I do.
Perfect.
Consent agenda items. I move to adopt the consent agenda as submitted, consisting of the following: authorization to post part-time receptionist for the DPW, authorization to accept resignation from the SAB, authorization to approve banner request school vote, authorization to purchase tents for summer camp recreation, authorization to obtain bids for bathroom trailer recreation, authorization to obtain bids for t-shirts recreation, authorization to hire land tech recreation, authorization to settle 2019 through 2021 tax certiorari proceedings, matter of Osmani, authorization to issue RFP for professional consulting services for fuel tank replacement at MWTP, authorization to issue RFP for professional consulting services for roof replacement at MWTP, authorization to renew annual system support agreement, NIC Systems Support Corp., authorization to hire program coordinator, NCUFY, authorization to set fee for lamp post banners, authorization to approve recycling resolution, authorization to establish capital project 2022 highway heavy-duty vehicle equipment purchase, authorization to purchase front-end wheel loader for the Newcastle Department of Public Works highway unit, resolution in support of the town of Newcastle's contract execution for electric vehicle charging infrastructure cost reimbursement from Consolidated Edison's Make Ready program, authorization to approve inter-municipal agreement with Westchester County regarding installation of a water main along New York State Route 120.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Jill, is there anything else? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.